Committee will come to order. Today we begin our fiscal year 2026 posture hearings with U.S. Northern and Southern Commands. I want to thank our witnesses for their service and for joining us today and for the time it took to prepare for this hearing. It's very helpful. I appreciate y'all. We know that border security is national security. Over the past 4 years, we've learned that the hard way. President Biden's open border policies triggered historic levels of illegal immigration. They also emboldened cartels that flooded our streets with fentanyl and other drugs made mostly with Chinese precursor chemicals. The human cost has been staggering. In the 12 months ending October 2024, over 52,000 Americans died from fentanyl overdoses. Republicans have been unequivocal. The real fix had to come from the top, and President Trump delivered. Through decisive executive action, including authorizing the deployment of 7,500 additional active duty troops to the border, illegal crossings have plummeted. In February, apprehensions were down 94% compared to the year before, and dangerous criminals and gang members are being removed from our communities. But the job isn't done. I look forward to working with the President and my colleagues on a reconciliation package that provides the DOD the resources it needs to support civilian authorities in sealing the borders. Meanwhile, America's adversaries are developing and fielding more advanced air and missile capabilities. It is clear the homeland is no longer a sanctuary. Chinese and Russian aircraft have ramped up activity around Alaska, including their first ever joint bomber patrol. North Korea keeps testing its long-range missiles, and there are signs Russia may be helping them. And China and Russia's strategic missile capabilities, including hypersonic weapons, continue to evolve rapidly. Amid these threats, it is alarming there is an effort afoot to auction off parts of the spectrum of DOD, and DOD needs to track incoming missiles. This spectrum supports most of our military radar systems, including our early warning and homeland missile defense. Losing it would put President Trump's Golden Dome initiative at serious risk and undermine our security. Turning to Southcom, China's growing presence in our backyard is a direct threat to the United States. Through its Belt and Road Initiative, China is expanding its control over ports, space facilities, and 5G telecommunications in that region. It's also snapping up copper, lithium, and other critical minerals essential to its military modernization. These are not business deals, they're beachheads. In a conflict, these assets would be weaponized against us. That's why I support efforts to roll back Chinese influence in our hemisphere, especially in the Panama Canal. Thanks to this administration, U.S. investors are potentially set to take control of the Chinese-run ports on either side of this vital waterway. Panama has also quit the Belt and Road Initiative. Russia remains active in the region too, providing training and arms to Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Cuba, as well as spreading anti-U.S. propaganda. And the Kremlin is flexing its military muscle. Last summer, Russian warships conducted missile drills in the Atlantic before making a port call in Havana. It is critical the United States wins the strategic competition with China and Russia in the Western Hemisphere. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses and gathering their best military judgment on how we meet these growing challenges head on. And with that, I yield to my friend, the ranking member, for any opening comments he may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank the witnesses for being here for our inaugural posture hearing for the new Congress. We have a lot of work to do in terms of looking at the budget and looking at our national security threats, and I think the chairman did a pretty good job of laying out what the concerns are in the North and Southcom region. Obviously, homeland defense is at the top of the list, and then organized crime that is involved in human trafficking and drug trafficking, and then the malign influence of China, Russia, and to some degree Iran in the region. On the border security piece, yes, there is greater security on the border. That is a good thing. I want to hear from Northcom about what DOD's role is going to be in that going forward. We have moved considerable assets down to that border. And as the chairman noted, illegal crossings are way down. Is that level of commitment necessary, and what is it doing to readiness elsewhere? During the first Trump administration, we used some of our military bases to house migrants. That undermined the readiness at those bases, the training that they were supposed to do. So how are we balancing that mission with this one, particularly in light of the reduced number of border crossings? Is this the best place to be spending our money? And then the real concern in all of this is partners and allies. As I said, I think the chairman laid out a really good set of priorities for what we need to do to protect the homeland and meet our needs in North and Southcom. But I'm really curious to see how people feel about partners and allies. The chairman mentioned Panama, for instance, as, moving out of the Belt and Road Initiative, and that's great. But if Panama thinks that the U.S. is going to use military force to retake the Panama Canal, I suspect Panama might recalculate who they need in terms of friends and partners. The tariffs that we are lobbying at Canada and Mexico. As all of you know, Canada plays a huge role in precisely that air defense that the chairman outlined. They are an integral partner. Without them, we could not have the situational awareness over our airspace that we have. If we continue to treat them as a hostile nation, if we continue to talk about annexing them, basically violating their sovereignty, what is Canada going to do? Are they going to maintain that partnership? In addition to that, the Department of Defense, a lot of the equipment that we need to build is done in partnership with Canada. We get a lot of parts for a lot of critical munitions and equipment that we make. We're actually going to drive the prices of that up. Now, nobody, apparently except for President Trump, knows exactly what he's going to announce tomorrow. But the tariffs that he has already announced, and crucially the tariffs that he has already threatened, are basically turning our partners against us. They are going to recalculate and figure out who their true friends and allies are. So I'd really like to hear from our witnesses, how are we going to navigate that? Can America really go it alone in the world? Can we really tell the rest of the world basically to go to hell? We only care about ourselves. We don't care about you at all. What are the consequences going to be for our national security if we take that incredibly selfish approach? And if we basically tell the rest of the world that we've decided that we are no longer the leader of the free world, we are no longer here to help protect ideas, we are in it for ourselves, period, full stop, and that is all we are going to do. I think the consequences of that are going to be devastating to the national security of this country. So I look forward to this conversation to figure out how we can better navigate all of those challenges. And I thank the chairman for the time. I yield back.
Thank the ranking member. It's now time to introduce our witnesses. We have Mr. Rafael Leonardo, who is performing the duties of Assistant Secretary of Defense for Homeland Defense and Hemispheric Affairs. Mr. Leonardo is accompanied by the Honorable Robert Salesis. He is currently Deputy Director of Washington Headquarters Services, but also has been advising the Secretary on border security issues. General Greg Guillot is the Commander of United States Northern Command and Northern Aerospace Defense Command. And Admiral Alvin Holsey is the Commander of United States Southern Command. Welcome, and Mr. Leonardo, we'll recognize you first for 5 minutes.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Rogers, Ranking Member Smith, and distinguished members of the committee, thank you very much for the opportunity to testify before you today on the national security challenges faced by the United States and U.S. military activity in North America and South America. I'm honored to be here in the company of Admiral Holsey and General Guillot, with whom I've worked with very closely over the past 2 months to implement the President's agenda in the NORTHCOM and SOUTHCOM areas of responsibility. I'm also grateful to have with me today Senior Advisor to the Deputy Secretary of Defense, Mr. Robert Salesis. He also recently performed the duties of Secretary of Defense and Deputy Secretary of Defense and was at the leading edge of advancing early administration priorities, especially our efforts to secure the U.S. southern border. Additionally, he brings decades of experience in homeland defense within the department, and he looks forward to joining me in answering your questions today on behalf of the Office of the Secretary of Defense. Today, I'd like to emphasize 4 key points. First, President Trump and Secretary Hegseth share your assessment, Mr. Chairman, that the homeland is no longer a sanctuary, and so our top priority is to defend the homeland. Second, we are surging DOD support and developing new capabilities to meet these challenges. Third, we continue to support our federal, state, and local partners, including through disaster response and our activities on the southern border. And fourth, closely tied to the defense of the homeland, is ensuring our interests are advanced throughout the Western Hemisphere. And to your point, Ranking Member Smith, that we do this alongside our allies and partners in the region. Both President Trump and Secretary Hegseth have been clear that protecting our homeland is priority number one. The United States faces a range of challenges that threaten our strategic stability, including vulnerability posed by our unsecured borders, China's unprecedented military buildup, and a range of other threats, including adversaries who seek to undermine our military advantage through asymmetric means. Adversaries should know that the DOD is redoubling its efforts on mission resilience, the ability to withstand, fight through, and recover quickly from disruption to achieve national strategic and operational objectives. In the interim National Defense Security Guidance Secretary Hegseth approved last month, defending the U.S. homeland was identified as a top priority of the department as we seek to seal our borders, repel forms of invasion, including illegal immigration and narcotics trafficking, and advance U.S. interests in the Western Hemisphere. The threat from drug cartels, criminal gangs, and illegal immigration are a national security threat. Transnational criminal organizations, including recently designated foreign terrorist organizations, cartels traffic humans and drugs, including fentanyl, resulting in tens of thousands of American deaths annually. On January 20th, the President declared a national emergency, proclaiming that America's sovereignty is under attack, our southern borders overrun, and we must defend our nation and its citizens. Since that time, the Department of Defense has been working to address these challenges and implement executive orders to seal our border, and we are proud to report a 97% decrease in illegal border crossings as a result of these efforts. To defend the American people, we're developing new capabilities. President Trump has ordered the creation of a next-generation missile shield called the Golden Dome for America. At the same time, we work to continue to detect and track and mitigate challenges posed by small unmanned aerial systems. To help meet this threat, the department will continue to conduct counter-small UAS operations, improve incident response mechanisms, and deliver new technological solutions to rapidly evolving threat. And we know that the Congress is also very interested in this subject, and we look forward to partnering with you to address this challenge. We're also working to bolster capability in the Arctic, where China, despite being 900 miles from the Arctic Circle, has made increasing attempts to bolster its influence in the region. While limited in its ability to project military power in the Arctic, China seeks to bolster its operational expertise and is invested in scientific research with likely civil military applications. In conclusion, from the Arctic to the Antarctic, in all domains, homeland defense and the Western Hemisphere are intertwined. The department stands ready to ensure that our homeland is fully defended. DOD is committed to achieving peace through strength. Our actions, both at home and abroad, demonstrate our resolve to defend the American homeland, protect our interests, and deter aggression. We appreciate the committee's continued support for these critical missions. Chairman Rogers, Ranking Member Smith, and distinguished members of the committee, thank you for your support and leadership and for the opportunity to testify before you today. I would also like to express my appreciation for your continued commitment and support to the men and women of the Department of Defense. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leonardo. Mr. Salasas, you're recognized.
Chairman, I'm going to pass to General Guillot and Admiral Holsey in the interest of time.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers, Ranking Member Smith, and distinguished members of the committee. It's my honor to command the men and women of North American Aerospace Defense Command and United States Northern Command. I'm also pleased to appear alongside my Southcom shipmate, Admiral Bull Halsey, as well as Mr. Bob Salasas and Mr. Rafael Leonardo from OSD. I'd like to highlight 3 trends of particular concern for NORAD and NORTHCOM with direct implications on homeland defense. First is the growing cooperation between China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran to challenge the United States. While their cooperation does not approach the level of complete integration demonstrated by the United States and Canada, the transfer of weapons, military technology, and basing access is cause for significant concern. The associated risks to North America have also grown. The number of Russian bomber incursions into the U.S. and Canadian air defense identification zones has returned to levels not seen before the Russian invasion of Ukraine, while the Russian Navy surface and subsurface vessels conducted out-of-area deployments off both U.S. coasts, including in the vicinity of Alaska. Second, evolving technologies demand that NORAD and NORTHCOM rapidly adjust our defensive posture. Small, uncrewed aircraft systems, or UAS, pose a growing threat to safety and security. Likewise, as competitors continue to target U.S. networks and critical infrastructure in cyberspace, a whole-of-government effort is increasingly necessary to mitigate potential harm. Finally, non-state actors continue to target our homeland. Transnational criminal cartels based in Mexico threaten U.S. territorial integrity and the safety of our citizens. And radical Islamic terrorist groups have rejuvenated attack planning and anti-American propaganda intended to inspire lone wolf attacks like the deadly New Year's Day attacks in New Orleans. With that strategic backdrop, Homeland Defense remains our command's essential task, and in mindset and action, nobody waits on NORAD and NORTHCOM. That mantra proved true over the last year as the command's planning and preparation generated swift and effective responses to competitor actions, major disasters, and emerging requirements. Over the past 12 months, NORAD and NORTHCOM intercepted joint Russian and Chinese bomber patrols off the Alaska coast, tracked Russian surface vessels off both coasts, detected and assessed numerous North Korean ballistic missile launches, tracked multiple Chinese dual-use military and research vessels in the Bering Sea and Arctic Ocean, and supported Americans in need following Hurricane Helene and wildfires in California while posturing to support Hurricane Milton response. We also deployed close to 10,000 troops and delivered unique military capabilities such as airborne ISR and destroyers in response to the emergency on the U.S. southern border and improved defensive capabilities against all threats ranging from ICBMs to small drones. Looking forward, NORAD and NORTHCOM modernization is crucial to outpacing our competitors. Establishing a layered domain awareness network to detect and track threats approaching North America from seabed to space is critical to immediate and future mission requirements because we can't defeat what we can't see. To that end, I appreciate the Department and Congressional support for fielding all domain capabilities such as airborne moving target indicator satellites, over-the-horizon radars, the E-7 Wedgetail, and integrated undersea surveillance system. These capabilities support long-standing NORAD and NORTHCOM requirements and will serve as the foundation for the Golden Dome construct. Defending our borders and establishing a national missile shield, protecting critical infrastructure and force projection capability, and safeguarding our citizens will require the best our nations have to offer, and I'm grateful to the committee for your ongoing support of NORAD and NORTHCOM's vital missions. Thank you again for the opportunity to appear today, and I look forward to your questions. We have the watch.
Thank you, General. Admiral Halsey, you're recognized.
Chairman Rogers, Ranking Member Smith, distinguished members of the committee, I'm humbled to appear before you today as the 33rd Commander of the United States Southern Command. We are a war-fighting organization, and I've moved forward to lead this command's service members, civilians, contractors, and their families as we embrace our vision of a secure, free, and prosperous Western Hemisphere. I'm honored to testify alongside General Guillot, Mr. Salasys, and Mr. Leonardo as the relationship between United States NORTHCOM and United States Southern Command and our alignment with OSD is critical to the safety and security of our homeland. The United States and our partners in Latin America and the Caribbean are linked together not simply by history or geography, but cultural traditions, security and economic cooperation, and a steadfast devotion to democratic values. The enduring commitment to these values is the cornerstone of our collective partnerships. Today, this vision is imperiled by a host of threats. These threats include strategic competition from China and Russia, the impact of transnational criminal organizations, and the complex transboundary challenges to include irregular migration, natural disasters, eroding democracies, food and water insecurity. China, our patient threat, continues its methodical incursion into our shared neighborhood, exerting diplomatic, informational, military, economic influence to export its authoritarian model to the region. Most focus to the east and west when they think about great power competition. A look to our south reveals that China has already established a presence. Its predatory and opaque investment practices, resource extraction, potential dual-use projects from ports to space threaten the security and sovereignty of our partners while jeopardizing the United States' national security. Simultaneously, Russia supports its traditional partners in Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela, using malign propaganda, military engagements, arms sales, and force projection. Moscow is attempting to undermine the United States' leadership, interests, and influence in the region. Meanwhile, transnational criminal organizations continue to fuel instability throughout the region. They exploit the permissive environment to engage in brutal violence, illicit trafficking, and other criminal activities that undermine the rule of law, disrupt legitimate government functions, and are having devastating effects that have spilled over into our homeland, destroying lives. Border security is a concern for us all. SOUTHCOM recently stood up Joint Task Force Southern Guard at Naval Station Guantanamo Bay in support of the Department of Homeland Security to safely and humanely hold illegal aliens until they are returned to their country of origin. Our time is now. Deliberate and meaningful action to address these threats is required, or this region, our neighborhood, will continue to change. Partnerships are our most effective approach to countering shared economic and security concerns. They enable our enduring trust in the region. However, we cannot assume that that will always be the case. To be a trusted partner, we must be credible, present, and engaged. During my tenure at SOUTHCOM, I've witnessed how our enduring presence builds trust. As a result, our partners prefer to work with us over China, Russia, and other nations to overcome their most pressing challenges. SOUTHCOMs continue to stand shoulder to shoulder with our partners. We have and will continue to respond rapidly to crises in any form. Together with our partners, we are building their capability and capacity to mitigate, respond, and recover from our collective threats. Sustained investment in security cooperation, combined in joint exercises, disaster assistance, among other initiatives, enable us to deliver and innovate at the point of need. As the Department sharpens its warfighting edge, I'm grateful for the continued support of Congress. This support is vital to defending our democratic principles and interests that underpin the stability and prosperity of our region and ultimately the security of our nation. Thank you again, Chairman Rogers, Ranking Member Smith, and members of the committee for this opportunity. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Admiral, all of our witnesses, and I recognize myself for the first set of questions. General Guillot, how have the cartels in Mexico responded to our shutting down our borders?
Chairman, there's two primary ways that we've seen them respond. First is they're trying to find new ways to get their products, whether that's drugs or people, across the border because of the SEAL efforts that have gone on over the last 2 months. And that's also forced them to have more cartel on cartel violence, as the limited ability to get across the border has forced cartels to incur onto other cartels' territory to try to get across. And so we're seeing an increase in that violence as well.
Admiral Holsey, how would you say that the cartels in Central and South America have responded to our closure of our borders? What behaviors have changed, if any?
I think the first thing we're noticing, Chairman, is the throughput or lack of throughput through Darien region right now. We can take a look at the cartels and the smuggling, human trafficking. We know that it's down. We know that Panama has worked very closely with us on that. With regard to the cocaine piece itself, we continue to see a record pace of cocaine. The price of cocaine has dropped. So the cartels are trying to find ways to get after that. But we have been very deliberate with JAD of South, which is a gold standard for interdiction. And they have been able to stop record pace at this point, over 190 metric tons. We're on a record pace to exceed what we did last year. So I think we're responding to it, but more resources will definitely help.
Great. And I would ask this question of both General Guillot and Admiral Holsey in a yes or no answer. Is the current DOD acquisition system getting you what you need when you need it? General Guillot?
No, Chairman.
Admiral Holsey?
No, Chairman.
And General Guillot, you heard me make reference to the auction, the potential auction of DOD spectrum. I'm concerned this would jeopardize President Trump's Golden Dome initiative's ability to track incoming missiles. Do you have that concern as well?
Chairman, I have that strong concern. Almost all the systems that we use for homeland defense rely on that part of the spectrum that's being considered to be either sold or shared.
Great, thank you. Mr. Leonardo, how long will it take to provide steady state southern border security, and what is your estimate of how long and how much it would cost to execute that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you for that question. We've been at this mission for about 2 months, so we're still continually assessing how long it might take from a steady state perspective, but that is definitely the goal, is to get it to steady state in return. As you know, the Department of Homeland Security is the lead federal agency, and we're in support, so we'll continue working with them to assess what their ongoing need is. I will say, as far as costs go, we did speak with our OSD comptroller counterparts this morning, and so far the cost is $376 million. So we expect that continued state of spending to take place.
You know, I took a CODEL down to Gitmo recently, and right after that, the limited number of people that were there were removed, apparently back to their original country, and I understand that it's very low volumes now. Do you anticipate there being a steady flow of removals from the continental United States to Gitmo, or is that going to continue to be sporadic?
So all of the folks who are sent to Guantanamo Bay are selected by the Department of Homeland Security and are on final orders, supposedly to head to their ultimate destination. So we're continuing to work with the Department of Homeland Security to determine who should be sent there, and we're in support of their determinations, sir.
So you don't really know if there's going to be a steady stream or if it's going to continue to be sporadic?
We're just continuing to test that, Chairman. I don't know if you have anything to add, Mr. Salas, on that.
Chairman, if I could, obviously ICE has an incredibly important job here in the United States. As you know, ICE is a very small organization with big responsibilities. Currently, they have housing for about 45,000 high-threat illegal aliens. That capacity gets exceeded quite a bit, and so they need additional housing. That's where the department has stepped in, obviously to use Gitmo. So I do think we'll be continuing to use Gitmo for some time until ICE has more capacity to house high-threat illegal aliens.
Thank you, Mr. Salas. I yield to the ranking member for any questions he may have.
Thank you. Actually, I was curious about the acquisition reform question for both General Guillot and Admiral Holsey. You said, no, it's not adequate. How would you change the acquisition system to make it more adequate for your needs, both of you?
Congressman, I think it's receptive to our requirements. My concern is the time it takes from the requirement process to go in until the capability is fielded. I don't have the expertise to tell you what needs to change in there, other than we need the required equipment faster.
I'm sorry, but I find that statement a little hard to believe. You're a four-star. You've been doing this for a long time. You've got at least a little bit of expertise as to how the acquisition process is harming you, I would think. And we're very interested in this committee and how to change it. I mean, you're an end user here, so you've got to be looking at this a little bit. Can you give us a little something more about what you think should be changed about the process there?
Well, Congressman, I would say that I think the requirement process is solid, but the time that it takes for it to go through and
I got that. I know it takes a lot of time. In fact, and it's just really important, I think, for everyone here. I think those two statements are in direct contradiction. The requirements process isn't solid if it's requiring us to take so much time to get us what we need.
No,
I mean, that's kind of where the problem lies, and I would hope we would want to change that process so that it didn't take so much time.
the time to establish what the requirement is, I think, is solid, sir. What takes long after that is to go through the development and procurement and delivery process is the concern that I have.
Admiral Halsey.
Yes, Congressman, 2 points I would make. One, as I look in this region, I must be credible, present, and engaged. The thing I'm looking right now is counter-U.S. technology. I need more of that. I need it quicker, and we need to find a process to get after that from an acquisition standpoint. There are a lot of innovative solutions out there, and I'll continue to work towards that. From a ship maintenance standpoint or ship delivery standpoint, I need ships. I need to be, again, credible, present, engaged to get after TCOs, to get after counter-drug threat. That's just 2 points I'll make. I'm sure I can find some more points with aircraft as well.
For what it's worth, I think the requirements process is killing us. It is too cumbersome, too long, too much detail. We need to more quickly buy commercial, off-the-shelf solutions, not rely so much on programs of record and requirements. And again, as the end users, the degree to which in the building you can help make that argument, that's going to help us get you the stuff you need faster. General Guillot, talk to us about how Canada and the U.S. partner on our air defenses.
Congressman, Canada and the U.S. are part of the only binational command in the world, in NORAD, and have been for almost 70 years. So the air defense, aerospace control, and maritime warning mission are shared between Canada and the United States in, through NORAD. And so we're integrated at all levels in that mission.
And if Canada were to drop out of that, how would that change our mission in terms of being able to protect our airspace?
Well, sir, the primary way it would be is the northern approaches would be severely under-resourced, and we would lose a significant amount of domain awareness and response in the northern approaches, which is the fastest and the easiest approach for adversaries to take to North America.
And Mr. Leonardo, on the border costs, you said it's $375 million to date, as like the last 2 months. How many DOD personnel are committed to the border at this point?
I believe the figure is approximately 6,600 active duty soldiers, but I would yield to General Guillot, who may have the more accurate details.
Sir, it's approximately 6,700 on the Title X forces are on the border, and then up to 10,000 have been ordered, and the remainder are in process of moving down to the border.
Right, and do you have do they have a specific time period at this point? How long we're going to have 10,000 people at the border?
Sir, I'm glad to answer that. As you know, Ranking Member Smith, the department has supported the border for several decades.
Oh, I understand that. No,
right. So, as far as how long we're going to be there now, I suspect for an extended period.
Sure.
Based on the results that we've achieved in just 60 days, to shut down the border the way we have, and to support our partners at DHS and CBP and ICE, it's an incredible effort by the Department of Defense working with DHS and CBP and ICE. And
but when these 10,000 were sent down there, they weren't sent down there for a 3-month deployment or a 6-month deployment. They're just sent down there, and then we'll just see how long they stay. There's no particular time frame.
Well, the executive order tells us to seal the border, and that's what the department will do. But I want to clarify the number too. That also includes the numbers at Gitmo, the number of military forces supporting Southcom too, sir.
I'm over time, so I have to yield back.
Yes,
yield back, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Wilson, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank each of you for coming here today. I'm very concerned about the renewed actions of the axis of evil that have taken to challenge the United States and Europe and Asia, but also in our backyard, here in the Western Hemisphere, threatening the security and independence of our allies throughout the hemisphere. With that in mind, we know that, sadly, that we're in a war we did not choose, of dictators with rule of gun invading democracies with rule of law. It began February 24, 2022, when war criminal Putin invaded Ukraine, and then on October 7, 2023, the puppets of Iran invaded Israel. With that in mind, the Chinese Communist Party continues to challenge the United States economically and diplomatically within the Western Hemisphere, and war criminal Putin continues to push aggressive disinformation and propaganda while continuing mass murder in Ukraine. And war criminal Putin is clearly and obsessed trying to resurrect the failed Soviet Union, oppressing the people of Russia itself, Transnistria, of Moldova, Belarus, while invading Ukraine and the Republic of Georgia, and threatening Estonia, and the partitioning, again, of Poland. With all of that in mind, Admiral Holsey, right now, 22 of 31 countries to the Southern Command still have a part of the Chinese Communist Party Belt and Road Initiative. It's really reassuring and so positive that Panama has announced they're leaving the Belt and Road Initiative, and we so appreciate our allies and the people of Panama, just great people that understand the threat. With that in mind, Admiral, what are the elements and what is the conduct of the Belt and Road Initiative, and what further resources do you need to ensure that we can continue the trend of pushing the Chinese Communist Party out of the hemisphere?
Congressman, the Belt and Road Initiative continues to portray economic opportunity. We see it a bit differently. We think our partners, by the time they realize what's going on, they've been duped, right? They find themselves with high interest rate loans, more data insecurity, resource extraction. It goes on and on and on. I think we have to deliver by making sure we can have an alternative, right? So whether that's, one thing our partners continue to ask for is our presence, right? They want a security cooperation, but also we can look at raising the profile of our businesses in the region. We need to find a way to have economic investment. I look at the Office of Strategic Capital, DFC, Exim Bank, finding ways that we can deliver for our partners quicker.
Thank you very much. Indeed, that's so important. I do want to reiterate again how important Panama is and what a great model that can be for other countries of the hemisphere to have their economic independence, to work freely in the world. General Guillot, over the past few years, we've seen Russia, China, and Iran continuously extend their reach into the Western Hemisphere. We've seen the Iranian Navy send warships into the Southern Hemisphere along with the Chinese Communist Party, and war criminal Putin continuing to increase military cooperation in the Western Hemisphere, with Russian ships docking in Havana, maintaining the communist Cuban dictatorship. And we, again, can see that his resurrection of the failed Soviet Union includes sustaining the very few murderous allies they have in the world, sadly beginning here in our hemisphere with Cuba. Is the increasing reach and cooperation between our adversaries a growing concern for the Northern Command and our Aerospace Defense Command?
Congressman, it is one of our primary concerns, and that is the increased cooperation between China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea, not only in exchanging weapons and technology, but also in access from which to operate. As I mentioned, the number of incursions into our air defense identification zones over the past year has reached a level that exceeds what it was before the invasion. And if you take the years since the invasion combined, that number of incursions is less than what we had last year, and I expect that trend to continue, and it's a big concern to NORAD and NORTHCOM.
And I'm really grateful that President Trump is addressing the issue of the Iran capability of developing a nuclear weapon. Indeed, with their ICBM capability, what we're talking about is an existential threat to our ally Israel, but also to the United States. And so the regime in Tehran should not be allowed to have a nuclear capability. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Connecticut, Mr. Courtney.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers, and thank you to all the witnesses this morning. General Guillot, at NORTHCOM posture hearings in recent years, you and your predecessors have described the increasing frequency of Russian submarine patrols that have transited the Atlantic in the vicinity of the homeland. You alluded to the undersea a number of times in your testimony. It's in your written testimony as well. Can you tell us, as best you can in an unclassified setting, if that trend is continuing?
Congressman, the trend of approaching our coasts from both Russia and Chinese submarines is increasing, and we need a expanded undersea detection capability to ensure that we are aware of these and can properly posture to defend against submarine-launched cruise missiles or ballistic missiles.
And when you say that undersea detection, you're talking about sensors, right? And I mean, there's obviously other levels of...
Yes, sir, I'm talking about sensors.
Right. Anti-submarine warfare, to follow up Mr. Smith's question, is a team sport with our allies. It starts in Europe in terms of Russian patrols, where, again, UK, France participate with the U.S., and then as it proceeds further west, Canada is also part of that team sport. Isn't that correct?
Congressman, that's correct. And if you use the last out-of-sea deployment in July as an example, The nations that you mentioned had first detection. We picked up on those, and using both Canadian ships and maritime patrol aircraft, tracked those, the submarine and the surface vessels all the way until we handed it to Admiral Holsey's command, and they went into Havana.
Thank you. And again, we're talking about a fleet that, despite the war in Ukraine, Putin continues to invest. In fact, yesterday, he was at a shipyard announcing, again, another generation of submarine capability for the hydrosonic missile payload, which, again, I don't know if you've been following that, but I mean, again, this threat is not sort of stalled out because of Ukraine.
That's right, sir. So the maritime threat and most parts of the air threat have actually grown over the last several years, despite the activities in Ukraine.
So again, the focus in terms of just what are the most effective ways to counter that clearly requires a multinational effort. And I mean, the good news is that we've had good participation in recent years. And I just want to associate myself with Mr. Smith's remarks that this trade war that has started is just a complete needless impediment in terms of, you know, having maximum levels of participation. I mean, seeing yesterday the pictures of South Korea, Japan, and China announcing jointly an anti-U.S. tariff initiative with the leadership of the three governments shaking hands, honestly was sickening. And again, we've really got to do more as a Congress, as a co-equal branch of government, to try and rein in what I think is just a really negative, dynamic that's being put into place. And you know, we're all going to find out tomorrow the extent of the next level of these tariffs. But it's impossible for, I think, anyone to argue reasonably that it's not impacting the ability of us to interact with our allies when their governments are being put under such strain and pressure with these policies that are again, seem to be cascading out every single day. So, and again, just Admiral, the general referred to the fact that the Russian naval presence does make its way into your area of command. Maybe you could just sort of allude to that in my final minute.
Yes, Congressman. Since 2008, we've had over 40 Russian air deployers into the region. So again, working with us, Northcom, we make sure we do some type of relay to make sure we can keep pace on those. I would say that we have to continue to have presence, and again, presence is power. We have to meet presence with presence. And if we don't do that, then we're going to see the space, right? So we have to make sure we stay in their face and have assets ready to engage.
No, and Southcom usually has been the poor cousin in terms of Navy sort of allocation of ships. And so, I mean, I think your point, I think, is really an important one for us to hear. And with that, I yield back.
Yeah, and we need to change that. There's a lot more resource needs to be going to South America, our presence there, than we've been doing in the past. Same thing with AFRICOM. With that, I'll recognize the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Scott, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll also want to reiterate the importance of the Western Hemisphere working together to combat the axis of evil, as we've called it in the past. Admiral Holsey, I want to start with you. You're from Peach County, Georgia, just outside of my district, but I go through it a couple of times a week, home of Fort Valley State Bluebird Bus Company, so welcome to Washington. You're from a great part of the world. I want to talk with you a little bit about drug interdiction and what percentage of drug trafficking activity do you estimate that Southcom is able to observe and collect intelligence on with the ISR and other assets that you have?
Congressman, we typically can action about 10% of what we see. So again, I think we have to be consistent, present, and engaged with this piece. And so more ISR assets definitely required to get after this.
Okay, so I want to reiterate for everybody who's listening that of the drug trafficking that we see, that we have actionable intelligence on, we only have the assets to stop about 10% of it, even when we have actionable intel.
And that's correct, sir.
What additional assets and authorities do you need to move that from 10% to 25%?
And thank you for that, Congressman. I think we need consistent, persistent presence to interdict and engage. We have to continue to do that. I think as I look at more maritime assets, aviation assets, ISR assets, and then the security cooperation as we continue to build up our partners' capability and capacity. Over 80% of our interdictions last year, our partners actually help us that, and that's based off our security cooperation. But definitely at this point, more aviation assets, more maritime assets to stop the flow. And we also have something called a ship special mission, which actually takes our partners out with interceptors to get after the fight. Right now, we're on a record pace, but I know I can do a lot more with a lot more assets.
Okay. So we talked about the assets. Do you have all of the authorities that you need to sink the Pangas?
Yes, sir, I do have the authorities. We do warning shots and disabling fire from time to time, but no authorities for kinetic. That's not what we're doing at this point. But we are, again, we do warning shots and disabling fire.
Mm-hmm. I think for some of us, we see sinking the Panga as actually saving lives because of the tons of drugs that come into the United States and the damage that it does inside America. With that, I want to shift over to you, General Guillot. You've got General Tom Carden working with you, one of the finest people I've ever met, National Guard, Georgia National Guard, and he speaks highly of you, so that's kind of all I need to know about you. When we talk about threats to the homeland, no one understands the whole picture of our supply chain vulnerabilities against the PRC with respect to IT, software, and hardware with our critical infrastructure. But we do know that we're vulnerable. What advice do you have for us, or recommendations do you have for us to ensure the defense and security of our nation's infrastructure against the PRC's non-kinetic threat?
Congressman, first, thanks for pointing out the outstanding service of Lieutenant General Tom Carden. He is a phenomenal deputy commander and leader, as you mentioned, and we're very fortunate to have him in our command. Regarding defense critical infrastructure, I feel that I look at it in two different ways. One is the cyber threat, and then the other is the physical threat. For the cyber threat, I'm very encouraged by the relationship that Northern Command has with Cyber Command and CISA to address not only the DOD networks, but the critical infrastructure and the defense industrial base to ensure that they're protected from hundreds and thousands of attempted cyber attacks that happen each day. People ask often if the homeland is under attack or what would it take for the homeland to be under attack. We are under attack every day in the cyber domain, as you pointed out. The physical threat...
I'm down to about 20 seconds, but I just want to reiterate what you've said. We're under attack every day, predominantly from China and China's proxies in our infrastructure systems, both in our defense systems and in our civilian systems that we depend on.
In the cyber domain, yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My time's expired.
Chair now recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Carbajal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We can clearly see that the Belt and Road Initiative in South America has been a goal for China that continues to come to fruition. I would say they have been successful as some of these countries have withdrawn the recognition of Taiwan. Both China and Russia negotiate with the governments of South America to build up military and commercial interest in those countries. Let's compare that to our own foreign aid, which has been decimated over the last few months, significantly weakening our soft power and allowing China and Russia, in turn, to further solidify their influence. Admiral Holsey, what is COCOM doing to combat the growing Chinese and Russian influence in South America? And does our diminishing soft power make it more challenging to accomplish this?
Congressman, thanks for that question. At Southcom, we continue to use the security cooperation support that we have. Basically, I look at the Joint Exercise Program. That's a great way to bring our partners together, build interoperability, trust, capability. We continue to do that. We have several projects ongoing now with our security cooperation, again, building cyber operations centers. So we'll continue to go that route. With regard specifically to the lack of some of the soft power. I have to use the tools that I have. So I think about the Lamont exercise, which is ongoing right now, where we've already done over 4,000 encounters with across the Caribbean doing medical procedures and surgeries, over 300 surgeries. I look at the Continuing Promise, what's going to happen this summer, another soft power initiative where we're going to have the USNS Comfort to go out to over 8 nations and treat thousands of people. I try to continue to build the resilience that we have. And last thing I was mentioning that we have the Trade Winds exercise, which is going to start next month in Trinidad and Tobago to do humanitarian assistance, disaster relief type response. So we're building capability and resiliency of our partners to help them be ready, and we'll stand shoulder to shoulder with them.
So, Admiral, if you could just answer the question, yes or no, does diminishing soft power make it more challenging to accomplish your mission?
Yeah, definitely. We always need soft power, right? So that's part of my job as well to perfect that. So yes.
Thank you. Admiral Holsey, can you discuss how the Special Forces Tactical Surveillance, Reconnaissance, and Tracking Program has assisted you in carrying out missions in your AOR? And do you think this is a program we should continue to make investments in?
Yes, in the past, it provides information from an intel standpoint to help us out. So yes, it is a program that I'm in support of.
Thank you. General Guillot, there are over 6,500 troops deployed to the southern border, helping with detention activities. 6,500 troops seem like a lot and an excessive number to me. I can't imagine there is enough work to go around since they can't assist directly with law enforcement activities. Can you speak to what exactly your military members are doing in the southern border?
Congressman, yes. First, I'd like to point out they are not doing any detention activities. So the 6,500 are all performing roles in support of Customs and Border Protection or providing unique military capabilities such as airborne ISR and the surveillance of the destroyers off of each coast. About 90% of what the active forces are doing down there is in what we call detection and monitoring, where they're using advanced systems to monitor the border and detect anybody that's trying to illegally cross. And as you pointed out, once they see that, they vector in the Border Patrol or a proper law enforcement agency to actually make the apprehensions.
Thank you. I know all these service members are following their orders and will continue to do so. But when do you think these troops will be able to return to their families, and in the case of the Guard, their primary jobs?
Congressman, as Mr. Salas has said previously, I think it'll be probably measured in years, not in months. The initial results of sealing the border have been fantastic if you look at the stats, but we need to make sure that, one, that's lasting and it goes through all the cycles of illegal migration that we see. Seasonal impact is significant on this. And then we need to make sure that it's sealed and it remains sealed. And I think that will take probably a couple of years.
What has been the decline in the migration since the buildup?
Sir, all the stats that we see is that the numbers of detections, incursions, apprehensions are all 95 to 97% less than they were before the executive orders were issued.
Thank you very much.
Expired. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Whitman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank our witnesses for joining us today. General Guillot, I want to begin with you. We had some conversations about what happened December 2023 at Joint Base Langley-Eustis, where we had incursion of UASs, small UASs, for almost a 2-month period. We got briefs about what happened there. They came in well lit. They weren't trying to hide anything. I felt bad for the base commander because he wanted to do something and wasn't getting backing from folks up the chain of command. We had a bunch of resources there where we could do things. None of those were used. If it wasn't for NASA Langley next door, we wouldn't have even had the sensors to be able to sense those unmanned aerial systems that are there on site. Let me ask this. We have, from a hearing then, asked for a priority list under 130I. What bases are priority? What's being done to protect those bases? How do we make sure those things don't occur again? I believe that our adversaries are probing, trying to figure out what we can do, what we can't do, and that's very telling to them. what they saw that day or what they saw over that month. It was very telling to them that there wasn't the type of reaction that was necessary. My question is this: what has been done in the meantime for us to be assured that NORTHCOM and NORAD is doing everything possible on these bases to protect them from these UAS threats? What's our counter-UAS? Where are we with prioritizing these bases? Where are we with training our security forces on base to protect those bases? Where are we with supplying kit to at least the priority bases, or have some network of equipment that necessary to make sure we're protecting these bases?
Congressman, since the Langley incursions of December 2023, NORTHCOM has requested, and then last November was given the responsibility to synchronize the DOD and, if necessary, interagency response to counter UAS incursions. During that time, we've conducted 3 assisted responses where we can use our new responsibilities to bring capabilities to a base, similar to what you saw at Langley, but this time with the authority to operate those systems based on our headquarters' close ties with the interagency and LNOs to get the FAA and other authorities that are necessary to operate once they land. The responsibility for defending bases resides with the services and with the installation. But what NORTHCOM has done is proposed a process where we would bring in flyaway kits to supplement, or in the case where there are no capabilities, provide the initial capability at that base to defeat that. Now, we don't have those kits yet, but we're in the process of acquiring those.
I would say there's certainly a sense of urgency there in making sure that we get that done, especially here at the homeland.
Sir, I share that sense of urgency.
Thank you. Admiral Holsey, I want to point to a study being done, or project, I should say, at College of William & Mary called AID Data. And AID Data is looking at how China has dramatically expanded its footprint in critical mineral extraction around the world, but specifically in South America, specifically Peru. There are 2 large copper mines there that are mining at record pace. China's putting a significant amount of money into those regions, much the same way they did in Africa, in places like the Democratic Republic of Congo, where they own 16 of the 18 mines. You know, we in the United States can talk about resurging manufacturing and building all these semiconductor plants, but if we don't have access to critical minerals and rare earth elements, those things to the left in the value chain, then we can build all the plants we want, but none of that's come to fruition. Give us your perspective on how you see the Chinese footprint expanding in South America, specifically as it relates to critical minerals and rare earth elements.
And Congressman, thank you for that question. It's no doubt that China continues to, or will like to, control the abundance of resources and rare earth minerals in the region. We know that. So I think what we have to do is have a solution. Recently, just last year, Exim Bank was able to finance a copper mine in Peru, but we have to continue to up that, right? So Office of Strategic Capital, Development Finance Corporation, we have to continue to raise the profile of companies willing to go down there. When we go to these regions, they know they have someone who's going to respect their laws, respect the environmental concerns, right? So we have to continue to get after that, sir.
Very good. Thank you. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Crow.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you to all of you for your testimony today. General, I wanted to start with you. The Air National Guard plays a very critical role in America's national security. However, of the current 25 Air National Guard fighter squadrons, 15 do not have a recapitalization plan, including the 140th Wing of the Colorado Air National Guard, headquartered at Buckley Space Force Base in my district. That's why my good friend Don Bacon and I introduced a bipartisan legislation to stop the decline of fighter readiness and stabilize the Air Force fighter force structure across the active duty, Guard, and Reserve components. Your written testimony stated that the Air National Guard is critical to generating greater readiness against high-end threats through enhanced campaigning and training while remaining available to NORAD when indications and warning triggers are met. I, of course, couldn't agree more with you, as Mr. Bacon and many of us on this dais have advanced just that cause. So Being in Colorado and being in close proximity to the 140th Wing, your predecessor testified not too long ago that it was key to have a fighter wing at Buckley Space Force Base to protect all of the stuff within the western United States, including the mini facilities in Colorado. Is it your opinion that that is still the case, that having an alert squadron in close proximity to NORAD and NORTHCOM and the facilities in Colorado and surrounding communities is still essential?
Congressman, absolutely. The Buckley unit is an outstanding unit, does a fantastic job in air defense, and they're critical to protecting not only Colorado, but the region's critical infrastructure.
And if there weren't a unit at Buckley, what would be the next closest unit?
It would most probably be Tucson or Tulsa.
Okay, a considerable distance.
Yeah, yes, sir. And we map that, sir, all the time with the range of the aircraft, how far they can fly, unrefueled, refueled, and keeping Buckley and the capability they have there is essential for our air defense as well as for critical infrastructure.
Thank you. And the projections were, I've seen a couple of different scenarios that if the 140th Wing isn't recapitalized and phases out, they would still have to then have a rotational unit. Because of the things you just described, there would still have to be fighter aircraft there that would have to be rotated in, and that has costs to it, right? In fact, in some ways, rotating in units is more expensive than just maintaining a permanent unit.
Yes, sir. The location is critical, and as you said, if the Buckley Guard unit weren't there, we would have to rotate a unit in, and you lose a lot of efficiencies and effectiveness when you rotate versus having permanently based.
So it sounds like your professional military opinion is that it's essential to have a unit at Buckley to protect the homeland and the western region.
Yes, sir. That is correct.
Okay. Thank you, General. Admiral, to you, can you explain to me the current security situation in Colombia? I've been watching Petro administration with a lot of interest over the last couple of years. It appears to be degrading pretty rapidly. I would just love your thoughts on the situation in Colombia.
Thank you, Congressman. I think it's a very challenging problem set. We'll share with you that I think from a mil-to-mil relationship, we're very tied and very tight. I can tell you right now, they're in a fight today. When it comes to the counter-TCOs, ELN, FARC, we continue to support them with our current authorities. But I think that it becomes more tenuous every day. But they are in the fight. They're committed to working with us, one of our strongest partners in the region.
And what more should we be doing to engage and to assist our Colombian partners with that deteriorating situation?
I think across the spectrum, it comes back to security cooperation, our partnerships, right? So whether it's joint exercise training, we do joint exercises, whether it's the different type of hardware and equipment, we can give them intelligence sharing, and we'll continue to do that. But we have to continue to stay at the forefront and understand their needs and work with them.
And you've also mentioned in your testimony that diplomacy and non-military means of engagement are essential for you as a combatant commander. Does that remain true, and is that an essential tool for you that we continue to invest in humanitarian and diplomatic efforts in the Southern Hemisphere?
So I think it's a whole of government approach, right? So I think we have to work across the whole of government. I think from a Department of State, having our diplomats in place, and then working with us, right? So again, I have a very small footprint as far as forces. So every engagement, every handshake, every look in the eye matters. So we have to be very committed and continue to do that.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Mississippi, Mr. Kelly.
Yes, sir. And General, do you feel like our southern border is more or less secure today now that we don't have just unknown threats pouring through every single moment of every single day who may or intend to? Do you think we're more or less safe today on the southern border?
Congressman, we are more secure today on the southern border.
And talking a little bit, Admiral, just in Southcom, I think that is one of the areas we can have the greatest impact. So what are we doing state partnership program-wise? What are we doing? Back when I was a young lieutenant, they used to send engineer units to build roads, basically combat trails for us, but roads. They would build soccer fields, do infrastructure, help with schools. What are we doing in South America now with our Guard and Reserve units where they get a cool overseas training ribbon and we get to actually impact a country's view of the United States? What are your intent to use some of those things?
So, Congressman, that's one of my biggest levers I have in the region is right after security cooperation, I always talk about state partnership programs. We currently have 24 states partnering with 30 countries in the region, so it's a very powerful lever. They do everything from subject matter exchanges, cyber, aviation ops. They're all in on us, and I can't do without them.
Yeah, and going back to those projects, though, we used to send engineer units and other type of units routinely to South America, which, again, gave them engagements and gave them familiar, but also gave support, soft support to, are you looking at reiterating that thing that we did in the 90s and 2000s?
So that's ongoing, sir. That, as well as the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, we're totally engaged in the region with the assets that we have. Yes, sir. And
then back to you, General. I'm really concerned. You know, we had a Chinese air balloon fly over the United States and basically surveil the whole United States, and we shot it down after it got everything that it wanted. We continue to have folks who surveil or send drones over our bases or put infrastructure things that have the potential to surveil. How serious are we in NORTHCOM in the protecting and hardening our bases against surveillance and also attacks?
Congressman, between both NORAD and NORTHCOM, we're very engaged in what you described. NORAD to ensure that the air sovereignty of the United States and Canada are maintained. NORTHCOM for the UAS challenge that you mentioned. And we're working with the services and with the department to increase not only the capability, but also to expand the authorities we have to knock out not only aircraft or UASs that are a direct threat, but also that are surveilling over the installation. And I'd like to even see it expanded beyond the installation to ensure they can't see anything sensitive on our bases.
Thank you, General. In the balance of my time, I yield to Mr. McGuire.
The new guy. All right. Admiral Halsey, U.S.-sanctioned Iranian warships have been spotted in your AO over the last few years. Last May, an Iranian warship reportedly equipped with long-range missiles crossed into the southern hemisphere. How troubled are you by this increased Iranian Navy presence in or near your AO?
I'm always concerned, right? So, again, we must be credible, present, and engaged. I can't be more clear about that. So when it comes to resources and assets to meet presence with presence, we must do that.
Again, this will be for Admiral Holsey and Mr. Leonardo. Under the Belt and Road Initiative, China has established itself as a dominant player in telecommunication infrastructure throughout Latin America. How could China use their command of Latin American telecommunications and infrastructure to threaten America's network?
Thank you for that question, Congressman. As you know, the President is the first of many to finally place a high emphasis on the Western Hemisphere, given how closely connected it is to the defense of the homeland. And with his increased focus, just specifically on Panama, for example, working with those partners over there, they've successfully withdrawn from the Belt and Road Initiative, knowing that that influence in that region, particularly with the Panama Canal, would be extremely detrimental to American interests. So I think the administration is very proud of that increased emphasis on that and making sure that we encourage our partners in the region to withdraw.
Admiral?
So we're laser focused on the possible Chinese incursion from the standpoint of cyber, right? So when you put Chinese technology on your critical infrastructure, whether it's 5G or safe city, smart city technology, our job is to try to illuminate and make sure our partners understand what they're dealing with, and then try to find an option, right? So again, some of our partners work very closely with us. We do cyber exchanges all the time. Every exercise we do has some cyber component to it to try to make sure we can help our partners.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair, and I recognize General Lee from California, Ms. Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Guillot, I'd like to follow up on some of the questions that my colleague asked. You specifically said that DOD will not be doing any detention of migrants at the southern border, but we've seen recent reporting indicate that the administration intends to use active duty military personnel to hold migrants at the border. So could you talk about what exact activities constitute holding migrants if troops are explicitly not detaining them?
Congresswoman, I said that we are not currently doing any detention, and I have no orders to conduct any detention.
Okay, and are military personnel currently or will they at any point be responsible for physically transporting migrants from one location to another or facilitating their transfer into DHS custody?
The Northern Command Title 10 forces at this point are not allowed to transport any migrants, illegal aliens, or other.
Okay, great. And will military personnel be operating checkpoints, conducting crowd or traffic control, or performing any surveillance of migrants or border area residents?
Well, to the first two, the answer is no. Can you repeat the last part, please, ma'am, on surveillance?
Sure. So they will not be conducting checkpoints, conducting crowd or traffic control. Will they perform any surveillance of migrants or border area residents?
Well, we do detection and monitoring, which includes surveillance of the border and the region near the border to ensure that no illegal crossings are either underway or about to happen. If we detect those, we notify the Border Patrol and they take any action necessary. But the action is not taken by the Title 10 forces.
Okay, thank you. And so then do troops have access to DHS surveillance tools, databases, or intelligence systems that collect or store information about U.S. citizens or lawful border residents?
No, we are very careful to ensure that we follow all intel oversight requirements, and we regularly inspect to ensure that all of the Title 10 forces that are in support of the Border Patrol follow those rules.
Excellent. And then when your military personnel come in contact with a migrant, they are not eligible to detain them. But what happens if Border Patrol personnel are not immediately available? What are the processes?
Congressman, what they do is they continue to surveil them using the sensors and the systems that they have so they can give updated locations to the Border Patrol agents. But as you mentioned, they will not stop or impede the illegal migrants. That's only a law enforcement action.
Okay, excellent. And as you know, General Guillot, the law is quite clear on this, right? The Posse Comitatus Act explicitly states that it shall not be lawful to employ any part of the Army of the United States as a posse comitatus or otherwise for the purpose of executing the laws, except in such cases and under such circumstances as such employment of said force may be expressly authorized by the Constitution or by an act of Congress, and no money appropriated by this act shall be used to pay any of the expenses incurred in the employment of any troops in violation of this section. General, can you explicitly assure this committee today that NORTHCOM's activities at the border fully comply with this law and that under your command, our military personnel will not be put into positions that compromise the foundational principle separating civilian law enforcement from military authority?
Congresswoman, I can assure you that we are very familiar with that law and we follow it to every detail.
Excellent. And what specific training and guidance have service members received regarding these legal constraints?
When the units are identified to come down to support the NORTHCOM mission, they go through an extensive period of training both at their home station and then once they arrive on the border during what we call the RSO&I process, which can take several days to a couple weeks to ensure that they have all the required training to include the standards on the use of force and the posse comitatus.
Great. Since January 20th, have there been any revisions or contemplated changes to the rules of engagement or rules for use of force for military personnel deployed at the southern border?
The only one that I've proposed is a change to the rule of force, which would allow us to shoot down or bring down drones that are surveilling over our deployed and mobile troops. That's the only change to the use of force that I've proposed.
Excellent. And are service members deployed at the border armed?
Yes. I've directed that all service members that are operating in close proximity to the border will be armed with the weapon that they are trained to use, whether that's a long rifle or a sidearm.
Gentlelady's time's expired, Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Nebraska, Mr. Bacon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm on the right side over here, or your left. Thank you for being here. And I got to brag, I did serve with a Colonel Guillot back in the day. We both got to command the greatest wing in the United States Air Force, the 55th Wing. My first question is to General Guillot. Tracking hypersonics is a big concern for many of us. I know for you as well. Can you talk about the challenges of tracking hypersonics and also add, what is the time from, if it's a hypersonics launched in China, how long could it reach the continental United States?
Congressman, and I share the shout out for the fight in 55th, and thank you for that. Hypersonics are very destabilizing. They're a tremendous challenge to us because they start off often in a ballistic manner, which is very easy to predict where they're going to eventually impact. But because of their speed and their maneuverability, all that goes away once they enter the hypersonic and the glide portion of their profile. So I think it also, because the speed cuts down the amount of time, sometimes to as little as 5 minutes to detect, track, and predict where it's going to go. But because of the end-game maneuverability that they have, really, we don't know until the very end where these could go because of the maneuverability.
What kind of capabilities do you need to better track this? What should we be funding in Congress?
The HBTSS, the Hypersonic Ballistic Tracking and Sensing System, is an extremely promising satellite-based capability to detect and track the hypersonics through the regimes that I just described. And then I think that we're going to have to increase our commitment to defeat mechanisms, which are challenged for the same reasons that I just mentioned, the maneuverability and the speed. We have some great defeat mechanisms, but they aren't geared towards the speed and maneuverability that hypersonics bring.
Sounds like a good priority for us to work on.
We would appreciate it. Yes, sir.
CJADC2 and AI, I know, is growing importance for your air defense command and control. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of the MAVEN smart system?
Congressman, MAVEN Smart System has become the staple for our joint all-domain command and control system because it not only presents a picture of the battle space in multiple domains. Most systems show one domain or another, but you can get all domains in MAVEN Smart Systems. And the increasing number of layers of live data that can be brought in, everything from undersea through space sensors displayed at the same time. So it's a staple to both NORAD and NORTHCOM, and I see it growing in the future.
Thank you. Admiral Holsey, what's the biggest gap that you have for the counter-drug mission, and what can Congress be doing to help you?
Congressman, I think the biggest gap remains assets. We have to be consistent, present, engaged, and have a consistent presence on the waters, in the air, to deter and interdict. So I think from an air standpoint, maritime standpoint, and ISR, all is very critical to the mission.
Thank you. I want to follow up on a question that General Guillot got earlier about cyber. I appreciate you talking about it's not just ballistic missile threat or hypersonic, it's also cyber. And you got to work with Cyber Command and CISA, which is, there's a seam there. We're trying to close those seams. Are there any additional authorities that you need to work with Cyber Command and CISA?
Sir, I think we have the authorities that we need, and I should point out the FBI is very active as well in our cyber defense. Having those organizations resident in our headquarters is helpful. Frequent talks with General Hawk, sometimes weekly, on the threat. And every time I ask him if he can take action, he has had the authorities necessary to do that on our behalf. So I don't have any authority requests at this time for the cyber domain.
One last question with my final minute. You know, I've worked in NATO. I've worked with the Canadians. I've worked with the Danes. And I'm concerned about some of the comments that these are our allies. And so as a traditional Republican, I hate to see the friction with our allies. Are you seeing any of those frictions at all at NORAD or NORTHCOM?
Congressman, as you know, in NORAD, we have several hundred Canadians that work side by side with us, as well as at the installations. At the military-to-military relationship level, we have zero problems or concerns. Everybody's focused on defending our continent, and I'm real proud of the effort that they're putting into it.
Thank you. Good to hear. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Jim yields back. Chair, and I recognize the gentlelady from Hawaii, Ms. Takuda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, when we visited Guantanamo Bay, we were told that there were service members there from every branch minus Space Force. The question I have is, where are they being reassigned from, and are we compromising our readiness and posture in other areas where they're now being detoured and reassigned to Gitmo? And what kind of military commitment, both people and cost, would be required if, in fact, we reach the President's thresholds of housing 30,000 migrants there? Clearly, there's a lot of additional costs, but even just the living facilities for 30,000 troops, right now you have service members in tents at Guantanamo Bay. What would be the cost and personal impact, and will this impact our readiness posture elsewhere from where they're being reassigned?
Congresswoman, from the standpoint of where the troops are coming from, as a force user, if you will, we put our RFF in a request for forces, and the forces come to us. We ask for specific requirements and problem sets, so they actually send the forces to us from all over the nation. So again, really over to the services to show the impact of the readiness of their command. From my command itself, the folks who are working for me that down there, from the readiness reporting tool, they are not showing any degradation in training or readiness at this time.
Okay, so you're telling me that we really don't know if it's impacting any kind of readiness or posture in any other theater. We don't know where they're coming from. We have to ask every branch specifically.
Yes, Congresswoman.
Okay. How about the cost? If we have over 1,000 service members there to basically oversee at the height, maybe 200, 177 individuals there. If we have 30,000 migrants at Guantanamo, what kind of military presence would you expect to have there at Guantanamo Bay?
So, Congresswoman, the Southcom always postures and plans for a migrant operation. We've done that in the past. For our planning shows that if we were to go up to 30,000, if we were to do that, and we have not been told to do that, it's approximately 9,000 plus service members to do that mission. But right now, we're in a tailored approach, and we have not gone beyond anything over 1,000 at this point.
Okay, so the President has said 30,000 will be at Guantanamo Bay. Everyone's talking about meeting the President's mission. You're saying it's 9,000 service members. What's the estimated cost, and is that inclusive of their housing, their meals, transport, all of these different things?
Congresswoman, I don't have the cost
If someone could get me that, if you have the projection scenario of 9,000 service members, there must be at least a back of an envelope estimate on cost. Now, I don't know if this question came up already, but when we went there, over 30% of the migrants there were low threat, which means that they did not have a criminal record other than having illegally crossed the border. So that being said, does it make financial sense and also military security sense in terms of where we're taking these individuals to house upwards of 30% of migrants at Guantanamo Bay that are actually low threat, low risk?
So, Congressman, obviously we work very closely with ICE and DHS and CBP on this. They make the determination of who goes to the housing areas. And obviously there's a capacity issue for housing that they have. So they will make a determination who to send to Gitmo, whether it's high threat illegal aliens or lower threat illegal aliens. And what we do is we provide the capability to house them temporarily.
Okay, so let's talk about housing capability then. Let's say 30,000 individuals do come to Guantanamo that are in fact high risk. We were told by ICE that they cannot be housed in soft-sided tents, like the tents that are currently sitting vacant right now. Do we have the hard structure capacity to house upwards 30,000 potentially high-risk migrants at Guantanamo Bay in hard-sided facilities?
Currently, we do not have that capability.
So basically, you're telling me the President's plan to have the hardened, most aggressive criminals, 30,000 of them housed at Guantanamo, is unfeasible.
Well, at this time, we don't have the housing, but if we were directed to house high-threat illegal aliens at large numbers at Gitmo, we would absolutely execute that mission.
Okay, I know I only have
ICE has
26
ICE
seconds of my time, so we'll definitely have that. Chair, I have more questions, but specifically, we've now been told that military bases will be co-used to house migrants. As the great-granddaughter of a Japanese attorney, Fort Bliss was one of those particular camps that actually housed them generations ago. What impact to readiness and budget constraints would this have on our O&M and MILCOM dollars if you now have to do a dual use in terms of both be a military base and a migrant?
Chair now recognizes.
Thank you. I'll ask that question in writing.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes the gentlelady from Virginia, Ms. Kiggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much to our panelists for being here today and for the update. Thank you for the work you're doing on the southern border, especially. I think we're all sleeping a little more soundly just knowing that our border is secure. But for the work you do, given Northcom's responsibility for defending against nation-state cyber threats, let's see, what's your assessment of the military's readiness to defend critical infrastructure, including power, ports, and logistic nodes?
Congresswoman, I think it's the ability to defend in cyber for the DOD network is strong, and then for the ports, we rely heavily on CISA and Cyber Command to identify weaknesses, and there are some. There are teams that go out and check this. I think it's improving, and I think there's a lot of awareness on it, but there are still some vulnerabilities out there, especially when you get into the defense industrial base and in critical infrastructure that need to be addressed.
Do you see it improving, or is it continuing to get worse by the day?
Ma'am, I think it is, at least from the results that I'm seeing from the inspections, it is improving.
That's good to hear. And then for both Northcom and Southcom, both of your commands rely heavily on military Sealift Command for logistics, transport, and resupply, whether it's supporting contingency operations, humanitarian missions, or routine sustainment. Right now, MSC is facing serious challenges with manning and the availability of ships. How are these readiness issues impacting your ability to plan and execute missions that depend on Sealift support?
I'll speak briefly from the standpoint of our mission we're doing in Haiti right now. Since November, the airport was closed, we've been able to fly 62 flights in there providing supplies to the MSS, so no impact there. I think as you look at some of the resources we flow down to the island as well as the commercial shipping, and so we've been safe there as well. So I think it's still, we have to continue to look at it and just make sure we notice our impacts that we're seeing, but right now minimal on my part from Southcom.
That's good, thank you.
And Congresswoman, based on where our locations are on the continent, we primarily use air and rail and have very little requirements that go by sea lift.
That's good to hear. And that recently we were in New Zealand with a co-down listening to some of the influence from China with some similar to kind of the Belt and Road Initiative that they're doing in Central and South America. But the New Zealanders were talking about kind of the shoddy workmanship from the Chinese and that they didn't use local employees, local workers. They would come in and build bridges, infrastructure, then that would then fall apart. So it was almost like the Chinese had attempted to make some inroads, places like New Zealand and some of the island chains out in the South Pacific, but then the people were really kind of catching on to what was going on and almost seeing through what was happening. So do you feel like that same thing is happening Central and South America, or are they making continued progress and really just helping with community development and people are buying that?
Congresswoman, they're not buying it. They're seeing it. I think by the time they realize they've been duped with these relationships, again, more interest, poor construction, resource extraction. Again, it goes on and on and on, right? So I think our goal is to try to have an alternative to them, right? So these state-owned enterprises, they know what they're doing. They're exploiting the instability, the corruption, the weak economies, and the lack of foreign lending shortfall to embed and get in. So I think we have to continue to look for ways to bring more economic stability to the region. We have an economic strategic working group. We stood up at Southcom a year and a half or so ago. So we're trying to find ways to get Exim Bank, the Development Finance Corporation, others, Office of Strategic Capital to come in and fill that void. And we have to continue to do that.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I appreciated your comments when you talked about, every handshake, every time you look in someone's eye, that stuff matters, just that people-to-people exchange. So along those same lines, we enjoy close relations with several Latin American countries, but how can we work with Latin American allies even more closely to achieve these close security cooperation on immigration, drug smuggling, and counter Chinese influence?
I think our security cooperation, one of my biggest levers, provides that subject matter expert exchanges, joint exercise program. Those things put me on the ground, right? So now I can train side by side. It builds confidence, trust, and really just that knowing that we're there for them. So we have to continue to do that. Security cooperation.
I agree, and just to echo Trent Kelly's words as well, and my dad, just growing up, he was in the Army Reserves and used to always go down there and work on those projects that he mentioned. I remember that, and I think those one-on-one things that we can do to help their communities are so meaningful. So thank you so much. I yield back.
Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from New Mexico, Mr. Vasquez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the witnesses that are here today. Thank you for your service to our country and for your time today. I represent New Mexico's 2nd District that includes 180 miles of the U.S.-Mexico border. I know nearly every mile very intimately, as well as our 3 ports of entry with our southern neighbor in Mexico. Now, for decades, the Department of Defense has operated Joint Task Force North to support law enforcement's efforts to identify and interdict drugs before they enter the United States. That's why I was proud to have secured bipartisan language in the FY25 NDAA, which requires the Department of Defense to make countering drugs entering the United States the department's top counter-drug priority. My first question is for General Guillot and Admiral Holsey. The DOD has historically engaged in several counter-drug campaigns. The dynamics of illicit drug smuggling have shifted over the years, and it's no secret that there's been an influx of fentanyl and other precursor chemicals coming into the United States from places like China. Could you give me an example of how the department has shifted its focus to prioritize countering the flow of fentanyl into the United States?
I'll start here, at least from a Southcom standpoint. We continue to work across the interagency to try to identify those crucial hotspots. Right now, we know that the precursors are going into Mexico first, so we're not seeing a lot in the Southcom AOR. We'd have some potential hotspots being Honduras, Guatemala, and Dominican Republic. So interagency work support doing that. We continue to see the cocaine, the prices drop, so the cocaine continues to come in, and we're getting after that at record pace this year, and I can do a lot more with more assets. But right now, I think from a fentanyl, we're still studying that very hard with our partners, interagency, to get after it.
Thank you, Admiral.
And Congressman, first, I've visited Santa Ana, Monument 3, and a number of the locations along your district, and I'm always very proud of the great work that's being done there. Regarding the fentanyl, we've seen the numbers drop significantly over the last 2 months as we've sealed off portions of the border and also established maritime blocks for this. We're waiting to see what's the next way that they're going to try to get that across. We established a joint intelligence task force that is bringing in the interagency and the intel community, along with Border Patrol and DOD intel experts, that's really illuminating that flow in, as you mentioned, with the precursors, where it's being assembled, and then how they try to get it across the border. I think this is going to take more time, but I think that we're on the right track to find and put the pressure on the cartels in ways that they haven't had pressure put on them before to make them find other ways to earn money than fentanyl.
Thank you, General. And I think our best resources are used in the ability to both counterdict the smuggling activities that happen, but more importantly, the actual precursors that are coming in from China and the manufacturing and the laboratory facilities that the cartels are using to then move that product across the country. I believe that's one of the best resources for DOD to continue its focus on, so thank you for that. And I remain committed to working with the department to stop the spread of fentanyl in our country. Now, I do have some serious concerns about a recent shift in DOD posture when it comes to immigration enforcement. And it is DHS's job to enforce our domestic immigration laws. And I believe DOD has to remain focused on preparing to fight and win America's wars. And I'm very concerned the department is wasting some of these precious resources, which I've seen firsthand from talking to DOD personnel at places like Santa Ana Monument 3 and the Sanitary Support of Entry and the Santa Teresa Sunland Park Station. Now, it's been reported that there's plans for the department to detain and process immigrants at installations like Fort Bliss and Kirtland Air Force Base. Mr. Leonardo, are there any plans to house individuals or families at Kirtland or other installations in the region?
Thank you for your question, Mr. Vasquez. And the administration shares your concern about the flow of fentanyl, which is why we're eager to support the Department of Homeland Security in any way that we can. I'll note, as mentioned earlier by General Guillot, the Department of Defense and its military service members do not do direct detention. This is always in support of ICE and CBP and the Department of Homeland Security at large.
Thank you, Mr. Leonardo. I have 20 seconds, and that was not the question that I asked. My question was about immigrants being housed at Kirtland or Fort Bliss. So just in terms of the actual expenditures that we are spending to potentially use Department of Defense facilities for migrant detention, I believe takes away from that critical mission of counterdicting fentanyl traffic. And so I'd love to see those millions of dollars actually used to protect Americans, and I believe that's best used by making sure that we can stop the flow of fentanyl.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Higgins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Guillot, you're familiar with the Joint Reserve Base at Belle Chase in Louisiana?
Yes, sir, I am.
They house the 159th Fighter Wing. They do a hell of a job defending our border at the coast. They work together, of course, with their partners, and they fly F-15Cs. You're familiar?
Sir, I'm very familiar.
Yes, sir. I would imagine you are. I've been advised that the Air Force plans to send F-15EXs to the Kadena Air Base in Okinawa, and my sources state that Okinawa would have difficulty supporting some of these new aircraft, and in defense of our homeland, which is the subject of today's hearing primarily, it would seem to a reasonable American that perhaps we should deploy these F-15EXs to the 159th Fighter Wing to defend our coast, to replace these older craft, as opposed to sending them to Japan. And would you potentially meet with this committee to discuss that? Or what are your thoughts on that, what you can discuss in this setting?
Sir, I would be glad to meet with the committee and discuss the air defense needs. The F-15C, although old, is still unmatched in air-to-air combat, and it does a great job. But as you mentioned, being old, maintenance problems, reliability problems, and fatigue on the aircraft is setting in. I would love to see all of our F-15 units replaced with EX.
So respectfully, General, if the old aircraft are all cool, why do we need new ones?
Well, as I mentioned, the
new ones are newer and better, right?
The new ones are better. I would like to see them replaced with EX.
So to defend our coast, regular Americans might expect that we might use the best. I'm just putting this out there. We might use the best and most modern aircraft to defend the Gulf of America and to patrol the Gulf of America, as opposed to sending them overseas. So all I'm asking respectfully, sir, is that we have that conversation and we can engage in that conversation in another setting. Will you commit to that, to me and my office and to this committee?
Yes, sir, absolutely. And I want to make sure I was clear. I would love to have the F-15EX.
Well, that's a real good answer. Yep. We're going to stop there on the F-15s because I want them in Louisiana. I think it's a real good idea. You mentioned earlier, General, regarding the northern trajectory. My colleagues across the aisle are quite upset about corrective actions that the executive branch is taking regarding our relations with our allies and adversaries alike across the world. You mentioned the northern trajectory. It was brought up as a concern. So when you describe the northern trajectory, you're talking about tracking ICBMs. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, and cruise missiles.
Okay. So ICBMs and cruise missiles. So the American technologies on sea-based and land-based and space-based technologies that track these launches, the launch of a cruise missile or an intercontinental ballistic missile from a northern trajectory, from that an adversary would most likely use to make a fast and effective approach to the United States. Can we track that with Canada or not? Without Canada or not?
We can do the detection and the mid-course tracking, depending on the route. There's some routes where we could track it without Canada. Others, if it goes straight, in the 12 o'clock position, we would need Canadian assets.
So the Canadian assets that you're describing, would you clarify the way those joint operations work when it comes to tracking ICBM? Does this not transcend trade negotiations? And we're talking about an incoming nuclear missile.
For ICBMs, the capabilities are all United States. Canada has a policy that they don't conduct ballistic missile defense. For the cruise missiles, we would rely on some of the radars and the fighters that Canada has, depending on the route of the cruise missile.
So you've worked with our Canadian allies for a long time, correct, General?
Yes, I have, sir.
Can you envision any scenario, under any conditions, where there would be an incoming cruise missile, ICBM, detected by our Canadian allies, or by American tech, that we would not share that with Canada and vice versa?
Gentleman's time's expired. Have to answer that for the record. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and to the witnesses for being with us today. My question is, and I would love to hear General Guillot and from the Admiral Holsey, how is Southcom and Northcom working together with Latin America and others in particular? I continue to hear a theme, identifying new ways that the cartels are now looking at making a path for illegal drugs into our country.
Congressman, two new ways that I think illustrate how Southcom and Northcom are working together. One is we recently established the Joint Intelligence Task Force Southern Border, which is headquartered in Tucson, Arizona, along with at a CBP facility. And what we do is we bring in interagency, DOD, and intel community feeds and fuse it and redistribute that information from there. That has led to unparalleled sharing of intelligence data on this mission set that used to be available, but not all processed from one location, and Admiral Holsey's team is a strong participant in that. The other is as we've deployed ships into the Gulf of America and also off the Pacific coast to counter illegal drug and migrant flow, we built into the plan that we could seamlessly move these ships further to the south if required to benefit Admiral Holsey's Guillot South mission. Or his resources could move more to the north to seamlessly address the illegal flow of drugs and illegal migrants around, the Gulf or in the Pacific Ocean, around San Diego up to the coast. We've never had that level of cooperation between our two commands before.
I would just add that as I look at the Guillot South, they remain the gold standard for the detection and monitoring mission. And so a great collaboration with General Guillot, but also I have to say our partner nations, right? So security cooperation, 80% of our interdictions last year was conducted along by, with, and through our partners. We have something called a ship special mission where we can position ourselves and then use the interceptors to get after it. Another thing we're working really hard with Guillot South is this AI machine learning. So now, based off that technology, based off time of year, size ship, aircraft, we can predict where it's going and make sure we can have assets there. But again, consistent presence is required, and I have to continue to do that.
I want to say, really emphasize this work because too many people, too many American lives have died, and we have to stay in front of it. And that's what I'm really emphasizing here, staying in front of it. I want to shift gears, if I may, for a second. Was honored to be able to travel with our chair and other committee members to Guantanamo Bay. My question is, as we've seen now Guantanamo Bay exists as an alternative while Homeland Security is actually increasing capacity. What do you see as Homeland Security increases that capacity, the long-term role, than what Guantanamo Bay? Mr. Salas.
Congressman, thank you. Again, the department is in support of DHS and ICE and CBP. So as they gain more capability to house, it could lead to us not needing our certain capabilities. But until that threshold has been determined, which it is not at this point, we will continue to provide that support at Gitmo.
And a follow-up there, do you anticipate or see any level of a timeline in terms of dealing with the capacity?
I know that ICE is working very hard at trying to identify additional housing, but I think they will continue to rely on the Defense Department to support that for the near future.
Okay. Thank you again for being with us today, and I yield the remaining balance of my time, Mr. Chair.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes of questioning. Admiral Halsey, by the way, great name. You had to be a Navy man, right? You had to be, right? Okay. Admiral Halsey, do Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua pose a security threat to the United States?
Yes, Congressman.
How big a security threat?
I think it's very challenging. I think as I look at the region and watch the engagement, I can see out-of-area deployers come in from Russia and pull into Cuba. When I watch Iranian ships come over and deliver goods and services to Venezuela, it becomes very challenging. And so we have to continue to keep our eye on that piece and make sure, but I can't be more clear, I got to be consistent, present, and engaged, and when I have aircraft, assets, ships in the region, I can block those maneuvers.
And would a regime change in those three countries make your life easier and also make America much more secure?
That's more of a policy question. I think anything that's going to make us more secure, I support, but that's more of a policy question.
Well, if Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua became friends instead of the way they are right now, enemies, would that make your life easier?
Yes, if they're friends, that'd be totally Democrat. Right now we have 28 democracies in the region, so if we had 31, that'd be great.
Do you think Cuba is the head of the snake in stirring up trouble in the region and also helping Russia, Iran, and especially China in the region?
So I would just say this. Let's be clear. They do it because they know they have the backing of some of the nefarious actors, where it's China and Russia. So I think it's a little bit of both.
And I share your concern about the intrusion or the incursion of Russia, Iran, North Korea, and especially China in our hemisphere. And I think for far too long we have been maybe not blind to it, but certainly not paying the attention to what's going on in South America with these nefarious actors right in our own backyard. And I think we need to start paying much more attention to it. Do you agree with that?
I totally agree with that, sir.
Okay. General Guillot, how many cartel members are there in the southern border? When you estimate, how many actually are members of the cartel?
Number of people?
Yeah, number of people, number of cartel members, yeah.
Sir, my estimate would be certainly in the thousands, as there's 20 or 25 to 30 different cartels that we're tracking and watching.
Can you give me an estimate of how many thousands?
No, sir, I can't, but I will follow up with that.
Okay, so, but those thousands are killing 50,000.
Through the fentanyl, yes, sir.
Okay, and while we've had great success in stopping the flow of migrants, I mean, we've down 90%, which, by the way, runs counter to everything we were hearing during the previous administration. Said they needed a lot more money, and really all they needed was policy and will to do it. What are your records, or what do you indicate is happening in the southern border with regards to fentanyl, which is killing 50,000 Americans every single year?
Sir, what we're seeing is the amount moving across that they're detecting is at about 40% of what it was before. So significant drop, but not to the same rate as the migrant flow. And then what we're also seeing is that a lot of frustration with the cartels at their inability to get fentanyl across the border, and so they're pursuing other locations to send it other than the United States.
Okay, and so they've been labeled as terrorist organizations, right?
They have, sir.
What are we doing about that?
What are we doing about
Yeah,
that?
what are we doing about it? They've been killing they've killed probably 500,000 Americans, and they're killing still 50,000 Americans every year. They're a terrorist organization. They're right across the border. What are we doing about it?
Well, for the last 2 months that NORTHCOM has had the mission, we've significantly increased several hundredfold the amount of intelligence that we're gathering on the cartel members. And
Do you think intelligence alone is going to stop them from shipping fentanyl across the United States and killing 50,000 Americans?
Well, I think it can, not alone, no, sir, but I think it contributes to the other actions that we're taking that is stopping it at the borders and that's stopping it from going through the maritime.
Do you think it's the number one duty of government to protect its citizens?
Yes, sir, I do.
And do you think we've been doing a really good job at protecting American citizens from the poison that's been flowing through the southern border?
Sir, I think we've been doing an increasingly better job since we picked up this mission.
Fair enough. I guess my time is up, and now I recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Cisneros, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And if I could just say, the Department of Defense is not a law enforcement agency, nor should it ever become a law enforcement agency. That's not its purpose. That's not its mission. But with that, General, I'm going to kind of change locations on you here a little bit. I'm concerned about the accelerated rate of climate change and its impact on the Arctic. The melting of the polar ice caps is creating an opening of sea lanes up there. It's kind of making it quicker, easier path for, China shipping, China military, the Russians as well, to kind of transit that way and with quicker access not only to Alaska, but down into the west coast of the United States. So with that, how is NORTHCOM adapting to the operational strategies to address the increased security challenges among the PRC and Russia? And really, how is that impacting NORAD in their mission as far as monitoring air patrols overseeing that area? And as far as the Navy goes, is this something that we need to start increasing other than submarines, naval patrols out there in that area as well in order to show the flag and show there and not let them take over these shipping lanes?
Congressman, the Arctic is extremely important to both NORAD and NORTHCOM as it makes up over half of our area of operations. Excuse me. What we've seen over the past year is an unprecedented presence by the Chinese in the Arctic region. For the first time, we had bombers that flew, Chinese bombers that flew into the Arctic region in July that we intercepted and escorted out of the area. But at the same time, there was also the highest number of ships, all dual use under the guise of being scientific, but also certainly military purpose there to map out, we presume, China's ability to operate both subsurface and on the surface in that region. So it's a big concern. What we're doing about that is we're operating with the Canadian military, the Coast Guard, and United States Pacific Command to make sure that we have presence both on the surface and in the air to monitor this traffic. And also, we've also expanded our intelligence gathering with the other Arctic nations, with the exception of Russia, all are NATO members, to ensure that we're sharing information with the other 7 Arctic nations on that.
As far as naval forces go, is that something that we need to start seeing more naval ships in the region? Do we need, I'm a former Navy guy, Westpacks, Med cruises. Do we need to start having a North Pole polar cruise now?
I would like to see more maritime presence, naval presence up there. I would point out that Admiral Paparo is very helpful in sharing ships up there, but we could use more in that region as, because of the strategic nature of that region.
Okay. And Admiral, with consideration for Southcom, an increased U.S. presence in South and Central America, it's no secret the region is expanding its ties with the PRC through the Belt and Road Initiative. So, again, not a lot of assets in Southcom. Again, we do Westpacks, we do Mediterranean cruises. We don't typically go down there. Every once in a while, we'll send a ship down there to kind of show the flag. But how do we partner with these countries to promote stability? And do we need to see an increased naval presence in South America, where maybe we now need to start considering routine deployments down in the area?
100%, sir. We need more assets in the region. Again, I've said before, I said in my statement, we need to be credible, present, and engaged. Presence means power. It sends a strong signal to our partners and allies, and also it sends an even stronger signal to would-be adversaries. PRC, Russia, Iran, they have to see us, and we must meet presence with presence. So I'll take those ships from the Arctic, and you can bring them down to the Antarctica. I'll take them.
Well, hey, look, we need to do more to increase the size of our Navy, but we need to have those ships kind of in those areas. And I know the big struggle with NORTHCOM and SOUTHCOM has always been assets, but we need to figure out a way so that we can get the assets to you as well, because those regions definitely are becoming more important. And, you know, I'm willing to work with the administration to see what we can do that. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back my time.
Chair, I recognize the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Van Orden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for coming. I'd like to give a shout out to my two E-dogs in the back there, Chief Master Sergeant Storms and Sergeant Major Rodriguez. We know who's really running the show, gentlemen. I want to assuage some of the fears of my Democrat colleagues that are concerned about the Panama Canal and remind them that in 1956, when Gamal Abdel Nasser seized the Suez Canal, the British and the French got together with the Israelis, and they took that back. And then the only way that was resolved is that there was a UN peacekeeping mission that took over security for the Suez Canal. In 1989, when Manuel Noriega was acting up, we did use military force to seize the Panama Canal in Operation Just Cause. So there is precedent for this because those are the only two strategic canals on the entire planet. And if we need to act in the best interests of the United States, as we have done in the past, or our allies, we shall. And that should not be controversial at all. General Guillot. Guillot, correct?
Guillot, sir.
Guillot, my bad, sorry. Hey, so the blimp thing. In your testimony, you mentioned the word, you didn't mention balloon or dirigible. You mentioned UAS 17 times, Chinese 3 times, China 7 times, but you never connected the dots between the Chinese balloon or Chinese UAS. And so I'm going to ask you, Mr. Leonardo, has the Department of Defense given the general the authorities to shoot down anything that is up and around our sensitive military bases or the airspace of the United States, these UASs? Does he have to call you, or can he do it himself?
Congressman, thank you for that question. As you know, it's difficult in the homeland.
Yes or no?
I had to take that specific question for the record, sir.
All right, so we need to have the authorities pushed down to the general, and the general needs to push it down to the person on the base. And when you mention that you don't have the capabilities, but you want to because of the procurement system, that's a real issue. It's been 2 years. So we have to learn, sir. I want you to not have to call him. And Pete Hegseth, who I trust explicitly, implicitly, I mean, he's a great dude, but he shouldn't have to make that call. He shouldn't have to make that call, nor should you. I just want to make sure that that is very clear.
Sir, I do have the authority to
You
shoot
do,
these
right
down.
now you can? But do you
over
have the
an
capability?
installation or a threat to the United States coming in, from the outside, I have the authority to shoot that down.
What's the threat? It was a Chinese balloon, and the Biden administration lied to every single person saying that they couldn't penetrate that stuff, that we were blocking them. That's not true. You need proximity. And unless a plane was flying with ECM jammers, that's not true. The Biden administration lied to everybody. I want to make sure you can shoot down something over Canada, you can shoot down something over the United States. So I have 2 minutes left. Admiral Halsey. Holy beanbags, I would not want to have been Ensign Halsey in 1988, for Pete's sakes. You weren't even a tin can sailor, were you? Did you get heavies?
Actually, I started on frigates and destroyers.
Okay, it doesn't say destroyers, it says frigates in your bio here, sir. Hey, you said in your estimate we can only interdict 10% of the things that we see, correct? So 90% of the stuff that we're seeing that are people bringing this poison into the country, 90% is just going to go because we don't have the ability to stop that, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and you said that the precursor chemicals go into Mexico, correct?
Correct.
Where do they come from?
China.
Aha, okay. So let me ask you this question, sir. In your professional military opinion, put aside everything policy. As an admiral, if we just started killing these people that are killing Americans, 250,000, 300,000 Americans, about the amount of people that died in World War II, Why aren't we just killing these people?
Now, are you talking about the ships coming across, or are you talking about
I'm talking about the ships. I'm talking about these narco-terrorists. Why aren't we just killing the people that are killing American citizens? It makes absolutely no sense to me.
Comes down to authorities.
It's policy and authority, right? Okay, so in your professional military opinion, if we started killing narco-terrorists and sinking Chinese ships that are bringing poison into the Western Hemisphere, would that reduce the amount of stuff coming into the Western Hemisphere and reduce the amount of American citizens that are being poisoned to death?
Well, just to be clear.
Professional military opinion, sir.
Well, the ships that are coming across are, the way they bring it across is legal, right? So it's coming in illegal, the precursors.
Check,
so
I
you
get
can't
it.
do that.
So is that a yes? I have 10 seconds. General, if we started killing the people that are killing American citizens, do you think less American citizens would be killed by this poison? No policy, military.
Well, I think if we aggressively stop them, it will bring it down.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair, and I recognize the gentlelady from Maryland, Ms. Elfreth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And my friend from California broke the ice for me a little bit, talking about climate change and the impacts in the Arctic, particularly as we're seeing increased and frankly very brazen presence from China and Russia into shipping lanes. I want to drill down on that just a little bit. This, as you know, this committee is very focused on acquisition reform, but we're also going to be focused on shipbuilding this year. I want to speak to or ask about a very specific type of ship, icebreakers. And in general, you mentioned last year in front of SASC that the lack of icebreakers, it's my understanding we have 2 functional icebreakers, one of which might also be going down to Australia on occasion. Those lack of icebreakers limit our freedom of maneuver in that region. Since your statement last year, what actions have you taken to mitigate this gap in Arctic operations, and have our allies help fill that gap since we are clearly underperforming?
Congresswoman, we are still severely underperforming in icebreakers. We work very closely with the Coast Guard to try to prioritize the Arctic region, and then I've made proposals to see if we could contract the capability from Nordic states that produce those while we wait for the shipbuilding to catch up with the demand.
Okay, can you give this committee any type of timeline on those partnerships?
I personally can't. I'm a recipient of this, and so I hope it's very soon.
Okay, but we agree that it's important for our national defense.
It's extremely important.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. And again, while we wait for shipbuilding to pick up, as we wait for our partners to fill the gap, you've also spoken about the importance of missile defense in the Arctic and our allies, both in detection and defense. I'm new to the committee, but would it be fair to say that the importance of strong diplomacy and strategic allyship would not include threats of seizing a territory of an ally by military force?
I'm not trying to be coy here. I really don't understand the question.
Okay, so we are now in a position as a nation in which our leadership is threatening the territory of certain allies with the use of potential military force to seize that territory. My contention is that that is in direct contradiction of our ability to form strategic allyships to the end of national security. Would you agree with that statement?
I agree in the importance of partnerships and building allies for a common defense, given that the task that we face with the multiple threats, 4 or 5 different nation states that can threaten our country, we need to handle it with partners. We can't do it alone.
And again, just putting a finer point on it when it comes to detection, missile defense, but also these critical icebreakers, as we're seeing ice thin, as we're seeing, particularly post-invasion of Ukraine, a great Russian incursion into the Arctic. Those strategic partnerships and allyships have never been so important in that region.
I would agree with everything that you just said, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I yield my time.
Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for our witnesses for coming here today to speak to the committee. I believe that a number 1 priority, as President Trump has said, is to protect the homeland. And I have a bunch of questions, but let's see if we got enough time to get them. And I'll ask each of you one at a time. Would you agree that China has more ability to attack the homeland today than they did 4 years ago? We'll start with the Admiral.
Yes.
Yes, they do, sir.
Absolutely.
Yes, Congressman.
You know, I recently, and by the way, we need to have reliable allies, not reliant allies. And so, you know, under President Reagan, we were spending 6% of our GDP on national defense, and it's dwindled down close to 2%. And so I'm a big support at keeping the American people safe. And I think the decisions that President Trump has made has caused our allies to step up and actually be reliable partners, not reliant partners. And I think for us to deal with North Korea, Iran, China, Russia, we've got to strengthen those relationships, and we can't do it alone. And so I think we're moving in the right direction. I recently participated in a CODEL in Southcom. And by the way, I served in the Navy SEALs. Most of my experience was Southcom. And I learned that the cartels will lie, cheat, steal, and they will kill you to get their way. And there is no way they're giving up $1 billion business. Now, when we were down at the border, we talked with the mayor, the sheriff, business owners. We met with ICE agents, Border Patrol, and the 10th Mountain Division. And we asked them, you know, what are your concerns? What's going on? And they said that on one particular Saturday, border crossings were 0 compared to 2,000 crossings a year before. And so I think, as I heard one of the members say, is we didn't need new policies. We needed a new president who was serious about protecting the homeland. But that being the case, what I heard from every one of those groups was they can see drones coming from Mexico. They can see where they're coming from, and they're hovering around our Border Patrol vehicles. They're hovering around our military bases. And General, I heard you say that you had permission to shoot them down. But I spoke with 5 different agencies, and they all, as of a couple of weeks ago, said they were not sure. So it is not clear. So I'd like to hear what the answer is. Can they or can they not shoot these drones down?
When I said we could shoot them down, that's over an installation that is covered under 130I. The forces on the border at this time are not, because they're mobile. And so I've put in a request for 130I to be expanded to include U.S. forces within 5 miles of the border.
I understand. There are many ways to possibly solve this problem. We're looking at legislation that takes a different approach, but we'll talk about that later. But we should have had this settled 2 years ago. Basically, there are many times in our history where our soldiers have been caught with their pants down, and they're reactive, not proactive. And we should be able to detect and engage far before they get anywhere near our soldiers or our installations. Let's talk about fentanyl. I call it Chinese chemical warfare. It's being produced in China, coming across our southern border and poisoning the American people. China believes that everything can be used as a weapon and should be used as a weapon. And if it were 10 people a year dying from fentanyl overdose, it would be egregious. And I heard a member say it was 50,000 people, but I've heard a number over 100,000 people a year dying from fentanyl poisoning. And if we don't make a strong stance, such as shoot the people that are bringing it over, if the penalty's not high enough, they could continue to poison us. Now, you think about, we've had skirmishes with adversaries in the history of our country where less than 100,000 people died in the skirmish. And I think we're at war, and we don't want to admit it. And so we've got to do something about it. I saw a video where the cartels undercover said that they were actually using the northern, coming in through Canada, trying to get the fentanyl in. Is that true or false, and what can we do?
Sir, it is true that they use avenues other than the south, come through the north, comes through the mail, comes through all sorts of different mechanisms to get into the United States.
What can we do as a Congress to help you logistically better protect our homeland and make sure that if we're going to put our soldiers and assets on the border, that they are safe and they are proactive so they got a better chance of coming home?
Sir, the first request I would have would be to expand the 130I so we can shoot down drones, not just that are in self-defense, but anything that's surveilling, planning the next attack on us within 5 miles of the border.
Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Whitesides.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for being here today. This is a time with novel challenges in these AORs, and your testimony is very timely. I know there has been a lot of discussion on moving sensing missions to space, namely to be put into proliferated LEO constellations. Most of my career has been focused on securing U.S. leadership in space, both from an economic and a national security perspective. With that in mind, I would not be the first to say that space-based sensing is a vital part of our sensing capabilities, but not the only part. I'm concerned that recent reports of novel weapon systems being placed into orbit could result in a strategic surprise if we don't have redundancy across domains when it comes to sensing air and missile threats. General Guillot, can you share your view of the appropriate role and relationship between space-based sensing capabilities and the need for sensing redundancies across domains?
Congressman, I'm very encouraged by the increased capability that space brings us and sensors from there, but I've always advocated for a layered approach that goes from the undersea, the land, air, and space to ensure that we aren't over-reliant on one domain, and we can layer the approach for detecting threats to the continental United States.
Thank you so much. Now, as we all know, Northcom's AOR has seen increased threats not only from foreign adversaries, but from natural disasters like wildfires, hurricanes, and floods. It's no secret that the increased cadence and severity of these disasters pose a serious threat to our CONUS military installations' readiness and to our homeland itself. General Guillot and Admiral, can you speak to the utility of, to the extent you can you speak to the utility of the National Guard's Fire Guard program, which uses satellite sensing capabilities for near-term, near real-time wildfire intelligence, not only as a means of protecting our constituents, but of safeguarding our ability to effectively protect our homeland?
Sir, I can tell you that that system is of great benefit to us as we hit the ever-expanding wildfire season. It used to be more closely defined. Now it's almost year-round, as we saw, with the tragic fires in Southern California earlier this year. So we use that, and we know, based on what we're seeing through those sensors, where we might need to provide DOD assistance to NIFC and others if it exceeds their capacity.
You get huge points for knowing NIFC and all that, so thank you so much for your comments on that. I think it's a very important thing and would love to work with you as we think about those things in the future. I'll just close with a tough one, and maybe it's more of a statement than a comment, and I know it's been addressed here extensively already, but I think the recent quotes of the Prime Minister of Canada who said it's clear that the U.S. is no longer a reliable partner. It's possible with comprehensive negotiations we could reestablish an element of confidence, but there will be no going backwards. The old relationship we had with the United States based on deepening integration of our economies and tight security and military cooperation is over, he said. That's the Prime Minister of Canada said that. How does this posture impact your ability to defend the United States from threats conveyed through the Arctic and through other northern territories?
Congressman, we've been fortunate that the relationship, military-to-military relationship with Canada, primarily in NORAD, which is a binational command, has been as strong as ever over the recent months, and we're all dedicated to detecting air and maritime threats and ensuring that we can defeat those threats to protect the U.S. and Canada. And so I have not seen any negative ramifications at the military-to-military level.
Thank you, sir. I yield back my time, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Mesmer.
Thank you, Chairman. General Guillot, I'd like to follow up on a question my colleague asked earlier about your testimony that in 2024, the Russian Navy partook in a training exercise with their submarines, nuclear subs in the Atlantic Ocean. If these would become more of an occurrence, would you continue to task the Navy with the same tempo of material, time, and manpower for all future Russian vessel visits in your area of responsibility?
Sir, depending on the type of vessels, yes.
Okay, thank you. Also in your testimony, you mentioned that air and missile threats to the United States from our adversaries continue to mount as North Korea tests ICBMs, Russia and China expand their stockpiles of long-range missiles. One program that falls under Northcom's purview of current activities is the Next Generation Interceptor. Your testimony states that it is a high priority for Northcom to have the on-time fielding of this interceptor. What would be the implications if fielding this system were to be delayed?
Congressman, if the fielding of the NGI or the Next Generation Interceptor were delayed, we would run the risk of falling behind our ability to defeat any rogue nation ICBM that threatens the United States.
Okay, thank you. Additionally, ground-based interceptors are dedicated to defending against threats that come from places such as Iran and North Korea. Due to increasing threats from other adversaries such as China and Russia, should policies be changed to allow for defense against those countries as well?
Congressman, I think that we should always look at our policies, and while they've served us well to this point, I think we should look at them against the current and expected threat and make sure that the policies are aligned.
Okay, thank you. Those interceptors are only effective against ballistic threats. Given your testimony about increasing hypersonic threat, do you think the President needs a space-based interceptor to effectively counter our adversaries?
Sir, I think similar to the answer I just gave on detecting, I think having a layered approach with both space and ground base would be effective. And then also, as you mentioned, hypersonics, the fact that they can maneuver endgame means that we need to invest in capabilities to defeat that threat, which is very different from a ballistic threat.
Okay, thank you. Admiral Halsey, over the past several years, China has made worrying advances in building influence with militaries within our hemisphere. Beijing has bolstered its equipment sales and donations and offered attractive training and exchange opportunities to regional militaries. As this has happened, the U.S. has placed increasing restrictions on its military cooperation and reduced its overall offering to Latin American militaries. What is Southcom doing differently this year and going forward to respond to this worrying dynamic?
Senator, that's a very great question. As I look at the region in general, I try to reach out to our partners and meet them where they are and ask them what is it that they need. Time and time again, security cooperation at the very top, maritime domain awareness, cyber support, space support. So right now we're trying to meet them, right? And in fact, I look at just from a cyber standpoint, we've been able to work with our partners, specifically Paraguay and Costa Rica and others in the region, to help build their cyber capabilities. So that's one of the key things they're asking in Canada, in Colombia right now. Our partners are asking for counter-UAS technology. They're learning lessons that FARC, EP, ELN, learning lessons from Ukraine and using basic rudimentary UAVs to attack our partners. So again, trying to meet them where they're at and deliver at the point of need.
Okay. Are current resource allotments for Southcom sufficient to accomplish this?
No.
Okay, thank you. Also, today the U.S. military has nearly 40 bases with 100,000 troops across Europe. By contrast, the U.S. has only 2 military bases in Latin America and none in South America. At the same time, Beijing has ramped up its increasingly militarized presence in Latin America, including through dual-use infrastructure that can be used easily to target the U.S. or disrupt critical supply chains such as the Panama Canal. The U.S. also faces deadly threats within our hemisphere from drug cartels and weaponized mass migration that increasingly require a central role for the U.S. military. Given all this, is it appropriate and sufficient for the U.S. to have such a limited operational presence so close to home?
No, Congressman. We need to increase our ability to engage and respond. Again, credible president engaged, more assets. Again, that sends a strong signal to our partners that we're there with them, and we're not doing that now.
Okay. Thank you. I yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes the gentlelady from New Hampshire, Ms. Goodlander.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. My home state, New Hampshire, shares a 58-mile border with Canada. It's a border that's been peaceful. It's a relationship, as you have all testified, that is really important to American national security. Winston Churchill said that it's a border that has been peaceful because it's guarded by our neighborly respect and honorable obligations to one another. General, starting with you, could you tell us why does the relationship between the United States and Canada matter?
Congresswoman, from my perspective, it's because we are part of a binational command in NORAD. And we share the strong and important burden of defending Canada and the United States against air and maritime threats, and that's built on capability and trust.
So the North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD, you mentioned it's the world's only binational command. What would it mean for American national security if Canada were to pull out of its cooperation with our country and NORAD?
Well, we'd have to fundamentally change how we approached air defense and maritime warning because of the shared and distributed nature of the command and its capabilities today.
And how would you go about doing that? What would that require?
Well, to be honest, I haven't put thought to it, but obviously resources. We would need additional radar coverage. We would need additional aircraft and maritime assets to cover what Canada provides today.
You mentioned air and maritime cooperation. What about land cooperation? Where has, in your assessment, where have our Canadian partners fallen short with respect to the security of our homeland and our border security along our northern border?
Well, as we look at securing the borders and having territorial integrity, I have talked with the Chief of the Defense Staff, General Cattignon, about the potential that we would look at looking to seal the north border. They have a system similar to ours where they have government but non-military capability that's augmented by military. While we haven't started any planning, we recognize that any planning to seal the northern border would be done jointly.
Is there a national security crisis? Is there a national emergency at our northern border right now?
There has not been one established, although it's something that we watch closely to watch, both borders to see what's coming across in terms of illegal migration or illegal drugs or other illegal activities.
So to be clear, as you see it, there is no national emergency at our northern border.
Well, I think there's, I don't want to get into semantics. A national emergency has not been declared on the northern border like it was on the southern border, but I do think that we need to look at all of our borders and the security of them with a high level of urgency.
So is a trade war with Canada justified right now based on your assessment of our security at our northern border?
Ma'am, that's not my place to answer. I can tell you on the mill-to-mill relationship, which I've stated is very strong with Canada, and they're strong partners in NORAD.
Suppose a trade war will have an impact on our mill-to-mill relationship with Canada. Would it be justified?
Ma'am, that's a hypothetical that I don't think I should address. I do think that that this relationship in NORAD with the Canadians is very strong, and my goal is to keep it strong.
General Admiral, I want to ask you, you've both served our country well and faithfully for many years. What is the role of military lawyers in our national security and in having a military that operates under the rule of law? Admiral, have military lawyers been important throughout your long career of service to our country?
Congresswoman, throughout my career, I've had military lawyers advise me at the appropriate time, dealing with different justice cases, so they've been helpful.
So is the firing of senior judge advocate generals justified?
That's a policy decision, ma'am, and I would defer to the policy.
But your testimony today is that military lawyers have played an important role in your career and in the functioning of our military under a system of rule of law.
Yes, they've been helping in providing advice for me, yes.
And General, can you speak to the importance of military lawyers in our system?
They're extremely important. I rely on them heavily. In fact, there's one in this room right now. I won't tell you who it is, but on our staff, so we use them all the time.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your testimony on that front because I think there's a real threat to the rule of law in our country today. And from what I've seen in my...
Lady's time's expired. Chair, now recognize the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Huh? Oh, you just snuck in on me. The gentleman, I'm sorry, Mr. Crank. Mr. Fallon stole your thunder. Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
My deepest apologies. Thank you all for coming. General, what's NORTHCOM's primary mission?
Sir, it's homeland defense.
Defend the homeland, right?
That's right.
Okay. Do transnational gangs and Mexican drug cartels present a threat to our homeland?
Yes, they do.
Fair to say that you could be described as evil, heartless, sociopathic criminal?
I would agree with that.
So it would stand to reason that disrupting their illegal activities and reducing their revenue and upsetting their organization and planning would weaken transnational gangs and the cartels.
Yes, sir.
And that would be a very good thing for the United States.
Yes, sir.
General, over the past 80 days, have the Mexican drug cartels indeed been disrupted?
Yes, sir, I think they have.
And has
Not
the
fully
revenue
disrupted.
been...
I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead, sir.
Not fully disrupted, but we
Sure,
are,
but disrupted.
Yes, sir.
Has the revenue been reduced?
It has.
And has their organization and planning been upset?
It has been.
So they've been weakened?
They have been weakened.
And by the way, good job on that. So illegal immigration presents certain dangers to the homeland too, does it not? As far as vetting, we don't really know who a lot of these folks are. There's a stress on schools and medical services if people are allowed to stay in the country. And it also, and more importantly, it enriches the cartels.
They profit greatly from the
Right,
illegal
because they
migration.
charge a tax or a fee, or
Yes,
whatever
sir.
you want to call it, and they make a lot of money, into the billions of dollars, and in fact, annually, maybe estimates are as much as into the tens of billions of dollars now.
Yes, sir.
Okay. When you reduce, given that, then, when you reduce illegal migration, you're denying revenue to the Mexican drug cartels.
Yes, that's correct.
So in that sense, and in many others, reducing illegal immigration is in the best interests of the United States.
Yes, sir.
So in 80 days, is that what's happened? Has illegal migration gone down?
By most estimates, about 97%.
So dramatically, like a collapse, not even a reduction, but a collapse.
That's right, sir.
And what's changed? I mean, when you look at the last 4 years and some of the record profits that the cartels were making, in fact, in December of 2023, I believe the number was about 304,000 illegal encounters in 1 month. What were the encounters in February of this year?
They dropped down from about 6,000 a day to somewhere around 100 to 150 a day on average.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was about 8,300, or give or take, in February.
Total?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So December 2023 would be 3,800% higher than February 25.
It's been dramatic,
Or
the
put
decrease.
it your way, 97% reduction.
Yes, sir.
And what orders were you given new orders in January of this year?
I was, sir, on the 21st of January. We, Northcom, significantly increased our presence in support of CBP, and also, really for the first time that I'm aware of, began using unique military capabilities to seal and repel at the border.
So the new orders you were given by your new Commander-in-Chief, Donald J. Trump, have helped secure the homeland.
That along with policy. I don't want to say that the military has done it all, but...
well, the military and
yes.
Certainly the Customs and Border Patrol.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
I actually really, truly, and being a Texan, feel safer today than I have in a very long time.
Yes, sir. And it is a team effort, as you said, but the numbers are significantly down since we became increasingly involved in the mission.
Kudos to you and Admiral Halsey and the great men and women we have on the border and the federal agencies as well. And General, my final question is, Northcom collaborating with Department of Homeland Security to integrate new and innovative technologies and strategies into the border security operations?
Yes, sir. And directly with the CBP, I've established a technology working group that's looking to see how in the near and long term we can transition some of the manpower into technological means to keep the border sealed and the threat repelled.
Just all options open.
Yes, we're looking at everything. Yes, sir.
I'm going to tell you a little story. In Texas, when I was in the legislature, they were using deer blinds. I mean, just something that simple, and put hundreds of them on the border, and that was just helping as well. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I yield back. Thank you, Joe.
Chair now recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Tran.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for testifying today. Like all of you, I am deeply concerned with the CCP's encroachment in Northcom and Southcom's AOR. The CCP is using a multi-pronged strategy that blends economic, diplomatic, cyber, and military tools to attempt to displace U.S. influence in and around the Western Hemisphere. We'll start with you, Admiral. How is Northcom and Southcom synchronizing their efforts to address the growing influence of the PRC across both AORs?
So first of all, thanks for the question, Congressman. So Northcom and Southcom, we always work together, very deliberate faction, whether it's the drug trade but specifically as I look at the China, it's the Joint Exercise Program. We continue to do that. Every exercise, every conference we do, we always invite NORTHCOM partners there. We invite the ambassador to Mexico to our partners, to our training as well. Again, it's that overarching effort to identify threats and get after it. But again, we have to continue to build partner capacity to get after it as well.
Thank you. General, anything to add?
No, sir. Everything he said is exactly the same from our perspective.
Appreciate it. Going on, how are both NORTHCOM and SOUTHCOM working to build military relationships in the region that counterbalance China's growing defense cooperation with countries like Venezuela and Brazil? General, you want to take this one?
Sure. We strive, sir, to have a strong mill-to-mill relationship so that our partner nation looks to us first. We do that. So we have 3 countries that are partners in NORTHCOM. With Mexico, we have a strong mill-to-mill relationship built on a foundation of exercises and subject matter exchanges. We also do with the Bahamas as the 3rd country in our region. I would say that the mill-to-mill relationship is strong there. However, I am increasingly concerned about the vulnerability to Chinese actions outside of the military, and we're trying to see if we can take outsized efforts in the Bahamas to try to curb that.
Thank you. Admiral?
Yes, thank you. So as I look at the region, I go to what our partners are asking for. They continue to ask for our presence. Again, maritime presence, ships and everything else, maritime domain awareness, cyber support. So again, we're trying to build a capability and capacity with cyber. They have more and more, they're asking for space support. As you may be aware, they have more space and labor infrastructure, and SOUTHCOM are second only to mainland China, right? So again, cyber, space, so all our joint exercises that we do have some component of cyber and our space. Again, well, it's UNITAS, different exercises we do, try to build that capability capacity.
Thank you. And as you sit here today, can you identify any additional authorities or resources that your department may need to effectively counter China's influence in the Western Hemisphere?
Certainly. So right now, the first thing I'll point to is security cooperation. That's my largest lever. So when I get more support there, I can do more, right? I can do more. Right now, we're building a cyber support center in 2 of the countries in the region. Those things help me out. So again, any way I can get more support for security cooperation, that builds my portfolio.
General?
Sir, I do not lack any authorities required to counter Chinese presence.
How about resources?
I'll always take more, but actually, I don't have any unfilled requests at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield back.
I've never heard that before, General.
I was going to say,
Yeah.
the first time I have ever heard a combatant commander say that.
Yeah. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Crank.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here and testifying today. General Guillot, it took you a long time to get to your hometown congressman, but here I go. Thank you. I'm very proud to have Northern Command in Colorado Springs and the wonderful work that you do. I'm especially proud, and it's been noted here by you and by others, about the great work that you've been doing since January 21st to execute the new authorities given to you by President Trump at the southern border. And I think it's a very clear message that most people here on Capitol Hill have gotten, that the American people want that problem solved. And not everybody here's gotten the memo yet, but I think most people have, and I know that all Americans are very appreciative of the efforts that you're doing. I also want to discuss the great work that Northern Command and Fort Carson's 4th Infantry Division are doing there at the southern border. And just incredible that in 2 months, you've got illegal border crossings down 97%. Just incredible work. But I also want to talk about another priority. President Trump made securing the homeland from missiles a major priority for his administration, and I'm excited for the Golden Dome initiative and what it means for NORTHCOM and for our national security. And as you know, there's ongoing conversations on the Hill about how much spectrum DOD needs to fulfill its mission. And General Guillot, can you share how a sizable reduction in spectrum allocations for the department could affect NORTHCOM's ability to fulfill its duties? And as a follow-up to Chairman Rogers' question about Golden Dome, understanding that details aren't finalized, but if DOD was required to vacate the lower 3 spectrum bands, would that simply delay the ability of the department to get Golden Dome to full operational capabilities, or would it render it impossible to deploy? And can you help me understand the magnitude of the value of the spectrum in deploying Golden Dome?
Congressman, first, it's a pleasure to be headquartered in Colorado Springs, a very supportive community. The spectrum having full use of the spectrum is essential for the Homeland Defense mission based on the variety of sensors and capabilities that must work together to build that network of detection and defeat capabilities. In particular, the part of the spectrum that is most often challenged would be from basically 3 to 3.5 gigahertz. And because of physics, that gives us the best ability to combine range and fidelity, and which together help us track inbound threats. So you couldn't move to another part of the spectrum and get the same capability. So I'm very concerned about losing access to that part of the spectrum because of the importance it plays in our Homeland Defense systems.
So given that this is priority of President Trump, how concerned should we be as members of Congress as we're sitting and looking at this possibility of selling off spectrum?
Congressman, I would suggest that you be very concerned, especially in the key ranges that your military experts will help describe, to ensure that we don't have to lose or share that spectrum because of the importance to our mission.
Thank you. Any other thoughts on that from any of the other witnesses? No? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Vindman.
Thank you, Chair. John Guillot, the United States and Canada have shared and prospered from a strong bilateral partnership for several decades. NORAD is a critical component of our homeland defense and provides aerospace warning and control for North America, which includes detection, validation, and warning of attacks, as well as monitoring of aircraft suspected of illegal drug trafficking, a layered all-domain defense. However, the administration has threatened this relationship with comments about making Canada a 51st state and dramatic changes to our trade relationship. Because of this, Canadian officials are starting to reassess whether a bilateral partnership, again, a relationship that makes us safer, is beneficial. At the same time, our competitors have the capability and capacity to threaten all of North America with a wide range of threats. If Canada and the United States were to halt our longstanding military cooperation, would it be harder to fulfill the current NORAD mission and increase the threat on the United States?
Congressman, the binational relationship, the binational command that we enjoy in NORAD between the Canadians and the United States, as you mentioned, has been established for almost 70 years. Everything that we do in the aerospace warning, aerospace control, and maritime warning is interwoven between the U.S. and Canadian capabilities. If we were to lose that,
is the answer it would be more difficult to fulfill the mission?
If we were to lose that, there are certain avenues of approach that we could not cover alone from the United States.
Okay, thank you. And so, with the President's proposal for a Golden Dome, would that make the implementation of the Golden Dome, and I understand this still needs to be fleshed out exactly what it is, would it make it more difficult to implement that system?
Sir, not at this time, because Canada has a policy, a national policy against conducting ballistic missile defense. So all of our ballistic missile defense capabilities are solely U.S.
If we're looking at early warning and the other aspects of that relationship, would it affect those aspects?
Early warning for ballistic missiles is all the United States. Early warning for cruise missiles is a shared responsibility between Canada and the United States.
Okay. Thank you. And can you tell me, in the July 24 intercept, did Canada participate in that intercept?
The July 24, I assume you're talking about the combined bomber patrol with Russian and Chinese aircraft. Yes, we intercepted with 3 sets of fighters. One of those sets of fighters was a Canadian flight of CF-18s.
Thank you. Mr. Solisas, you were acting Secretary of Defense for a short period of time in the Trump administration. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And that's an immense responsibility and honor, isn't it?
It is an incredible honor.
And you took that responsibility seriously.
Absolutely.
Were you involved in any signal chats, either a small group PC or anything that sounds like an NSA type meeting, PC, PCC, DC, during your time as acting secretary?
No, I was not. I don't even have signal chat.
Okay. And part of your responsibility as secretary was to enforce good order and discipline. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And if a service member had violated operational security, would you expect that there would be charges on that service member?
We have policies that govern what we do in security violations.
Yeah. And so, have you read the signal chats, that the reports on the signal chats?
No, I have not, and based on it being under review, I think it's inappropriate for me to comment on that.
Okay, but you have not read the chats, that article. You're not familiar with that.
I'm familiar that it's out there. I haven't read it.
But would you? You said you don't have signal. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Well, it's my opinion, and the opinion of many, that especially for my time as a member of the National Security Council staff, that those chats were completely inappropriate. I was frankly floored seeing that there was a small group PC that was on signal, and a non-secure non-government system. And as a service member, as a commander, I certainly would have been preferring charges on somebody that committed that violation. As a JAG officer, I've been preparing to prosecute those. And when you have a spill, you have to investigate the spill, you have to remediate it, because you have to understand the full scope of the damage, and you have to hold people accountable. And I haven't seen that yet, and that's a major problem. Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Guam, Mr. Moreland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Assistant Secretary, thank you for meeting with me just last week during your visit to Guam with Secretary Hegseth. The Secretary demonstrated a historic commitment to support Guam and build out the right missile defense system for the island. Another administration priority has been the development of the Golden Dome to protect the entire United States. So how will Guam's missile defense be part of this Golden Dome approach, and how would the Golden Dome make the people of Guam safer?
Thank you, Congressman, and it was a pleasure to meet you as well. As you noted, Secretary Hegseth actually was the first secretary since Donald Rumsfeld to visit Guam, so he was very proud to be able to do that and note that Guam is part of the homeland. And so, as you know, it's a high priority to appropriately defend Guam, and that will definitely be part of considerations as we consider the larger Golden Dome initiative.
Excellent. Let's see, a program that I also supported is the National Guard State Partnership Program, which SOUTHCOM often relies upon to work with regional partners. I'm particularly proud of Guam National Guard's work in their state partnership with the Republic of Palau and the Philippines. So, Admiral, given that there was 18 U.S. states that have established National Guard partnerships with Latin America countries and 30 participating partner nations within your area of responsibility, have you gained any insight which can help Congress further support the state partnership program?
Thank you, Congressman. The state partnership actually have 24 states supporting 30 countries in the region. They do typically over 325 activities in the hemisphere, so it's a great lever. It's probably one of my largest levers next to security cooperation. Again, I can't get enough of it, so we're looking for more opportunity, and definitely from the standpoint of Joint Exercise Program, they're going down, they're doing aviation ops, they're doing cyber ops, so these things are all very important to build our partner capability and capacity.
Thank you. Then for NORTHCOM and SOUTHCOM are actively monitoring and countering the influence of external state actors, including China and Russia. These concerns also have a significant impact on Guam. In particular, Guam and the CNMI have seen a noticeable rise in illegal Chinese immigration, with individuals using our shores as a point of entry into the U.S. Additionally, Guam has been grappling with influx of drugs, including fentanyl and methamphetamine. In your testimony, you have thoroughly outlined the efforts your commands have undertaken to secure our southern border and to carry out counter-narcotic missions. This question is for both the Admiral and the General. What have been your most effective strategies for addressing illegal immigration and narcotic trafficking across the southern border?
Congressman, the most effective technique we've used is partnership with Border Patrol. We serve in 9 different mission areas that are Border Patrol mission areas where they just lack the capacity, not the capability, but the capacity. And so our ability to fill in with military capability there has been helpful. But over the last 2 months, being able to also provide unique military capabilities that aren't resident in DHS to help complement those mission areas that are, has led to or contributed to the dramatic reductions that we've talked about here today.
With regard to the counter-drug piece and migration both, I think the first of all, consistent presence is required for the to interdict and that mission there for the drug. So we'll continue to do that. We work that very closely with our partners. Right? So our allies and partners contributed to over 80% of our interdictions last year, along with us. So again, that we look at that piece there, building capability and capacity for our partners. I look at the Panamanian example, specifically going through the Darien Gap. They've been able to close that gap down. Again, so working with our partners is and security cooperation helps them to achieve that.
Okay, the Guam Missile Defense System is being built to protect the people of Guam and is a critical military logistical hub in the Indo-Pacific from ballistic missiles. And this question is for a general. In your testimony, you spoke about the need to improve our ability to detect and track incoming threats, such as missiles from our adversaries. Are current systems being developed and implemented going into providing tracking across the Pacific to also support Guam Missile Defense System? And if not, what else are we doing to ensure that it does?
Congressman, my responsibility is to defend the continental United States, Alaska, and Hawaii, but the systems and Indo-PACOM is responsible for defending Guam. However, the systems...
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair now recognizes Mr. Bell of Missouri.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers and Ranking Member Smith. Hello, General Guillot, Admiral Holsey, Mr. Leonardo, and Mr. Celestis. Last year, we saw a notable increase in drone and UAV activity near sensitive infrastructure, including military installations. In my home state of Missouri, we're proud to host several crucial and vital military and intelligence installations, including NGA West in my district in St. Louis. I'm deeply concerned regarding the threats unauthorized drones pose to our intelligence operations and military personnel. General Guillot, are there additional authorizations NORAD and NORTHCOM need that could help enhance their ability to detect and counter unauthorized drones and UASs?
Congressman, the biggest benefit that we would get would be from expanding 130I authorities to include information sharing with on those tracks with federal, state, and local law enforcement, would be to classify all DOD installations as covered under 130I instead of just select ones, and then also to expand the area that we can engage a UAS instead of being limited to the perimeter of the installation to go slightly outside so we can get UAVs that might be looking across into our installations, or somebody that we detected and is trying to get away, that we can get them and capture whatever it is that they surveilled over our installations.
Given the critical role that geospatial intelligence plays in air defense with the development of hypersonic weapons and advanced drone technologies by our adversaries, how does NORTHCOM collaborate with NGA West to enhance and optimize the operational effectiveness and mission planning of our Air Force's assets?
Sir, they're an extremely important partner with us. In fact, we have a presence in our headquarters of NGA personnel because of the day-to-day reliance we have in all of our mission areas. To be clear that every advanced mission we do includes NGA capabilities.
Admiral Holsey, given the Trump administration's waiver for funding the multinational security support mission in Haiti and the recent delivery of $6 million in armed vehicles and heavy equipment to Haitian National Police to combat gang violence, with Southcom playing a key role in delivering this support. Can you outline whether Southcom plans to provide additional equipment or resources to the MSS or Haitian National Police?
Congressman, there's been no decrement in funding at this point. I have funding to the end of the year to support the Haitian National Police and the MSS mission. So right now, my role is to provide logistics, supplies, service, and support. I've done that since the airport was closed, and I continue to do that to this day.
And how does the ongoing insecurity in Haiti impact Southcom's operational readiness, particularly in addressing broader regional security challenges?
I think we've watched the Haiti problem very closely. That's one of the key items I've been watching for the last couple of years. I would say that as we continue to go down this path, if the unrest continues, it will require more support. We look for continue to push, and hope the international community would come in as well to do a UN peacekeeping mission. That's probably the way forward.
Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Harrigan.
General and Admiral, thanks for your testimony today. Genuinely appreciate it, and I'm certainly very thankful for a 97% reduction in illegal immigration coming from our southern border. I think that's a phenomenal testament to your work, the work of the men and women who serve underneath your commands, and my only encouragement is to go stop the other three. So from the American people, thank you, and Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Keating.
Hey, Mr. Chairman. At the beginning of the opening statements, I noticed our witnesses talked about the importance in the Western Hemisphere, in the North and the South, from countering the importation of the authoritarian model of government. I noticed also to counter this, that our witnesses said we could do this by our bonding and relationship with arms sales, with rule of law, and disaster assistance. All things that you said were important in the relationship. And also, in questioning, heard people say, when they were saying, did recent events affect our relationship with these partners that are so important in the hemisphere, saying that, well, it's a whole of government approach, and it's military to military, it's fine, but it's whole of government. So I just want to look at a couple of issues here. Arms sales, one of the things that bonds us. You know, 8 countries participated together on the F-35 partnership. And the successor, F-47, President Trump said the version sold to our allies would be deliberately downgraded because someday they won't be our allies. Does that sound, Mr. Leonardo, like the kind of whole-of-government approach that we should be taking?
Sir, as you noted, working alongside our allies and partners is key to securing the region, and all of the work that we do in the Department of Defense across the world, we definitely rely on our allies and partners to do that.
Well, glad you said that, but it's not conforming with reality and the facts that are being done. You see the results. Canada just made a $4.2 billion agreement with Australia just this past month in dealing with cutting-edge radar. And they're now engaged in talks publicly with the EU in their discrete defense building separate from the United States. These are the results that we're getting in our hemisphere from this kind of the whole-of-government approach that President Trump is issuing. In Brazil, they're just continuing to trade with China, and they're doing it in Chinese currency, putting our dollar on the sidelines. And disaster relief that's supposed to bond us all together. President Trump just cut the USAID money drastically, the same disaster relief that we're talking about that will bond us together in the Western Hemisphere. And I can't imagine. Do you think, Mr. Leonardo, that saying to Canada that they should be the 54th state is a whole-of-government approach, bring our allies together?
Sir, I just recently met with my counterpart in Canada, and as noted earlier, the mill-to-mill relationship is strong.
So you're saying they like this in Canada?
Sir,
they're happy with that statement in Canada?
As noted earlier, we want to make sure we have reliable partners and not reliant partners, and at times with our friends, we have to be firm.
So having statehood is good. You don't think that's demeaning to the country of Canada?
Sir, as noted earlier...
What about taking over Greenland if necessary by force? Is that making us bond with our people here? What about threatening to invade Mexico? Is that making us bond with them? Or Panama, for that matter? I mean, these are things you think the whole of government approach, bringing us together? And what about the rule of law? What about the rule of law? One of the things that was referenced in the beginning, holding us together. Do you think that having a vice president that says that, well, if the courts here say one thing, what are they going to do? They can't make us implement that. Is that a good statement in a whole of government for these bonding things we talked about right at the outset of this hearing? I am just, Mr. Leonardo, maybe you found the one person in Canada that wasn't offended by saying it wasn't, the president didn't want to make them the 51st state, but what about the rest of Canada? You can't close your eyes to these things. And I understand the military is going to work in their, their universe. But you're here representing the administration. Can you sit there and tell me these are things that bond us together the same way that the initial testimony indicated?
After many administrations' attempts to have our allies and partners increase their investment into defense, President Trump was the first to get the Europeans to pay more. I think sometimes we need to have tough love with our allies and partners so that we can be reliable.
Well, I'd say this, if I could.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. McCormick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And with your permission, I'd like to yield 30 seconds to Representative Van Orden.
Mr. Leonardo, if someone in a previous administration on the National Security Council conspired to unlawfully disclose classified information to start something like the Russia collusion hoax, should they be able to hold a security clearance, yes or no?
No.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. First of all, great to see you. General, I just talked to General Carnes. He's a big fan of yours. He's working well with you. From my understanding, you guys are doing great things. Appreciate you. Also, it's funny, as a Marine, I remember Sergeant Majors, I always like to see that scowl on the second roll. It makes me feel much more at home. I appreciate that. I got a box of crayons for you, and when we get done, it would be awesome. We'll eat together. I appreciate everything we're doing right now. One of the big questions I had actually, I want to start with Admiral Holsey, if you don't mind. The Chinese fishing fleet is really worrisome to me. Obviously, it's a paramilitary unit that's used to kind of confound our issues, especially in the Western Hemisphere. I'm very concerned about that. Our maritime sovereignty in the Western Hemisphere and the Monroe Doctrine is very important to me. I think we've really led up on that. We've seen incursions by China and Russia, the influence they have in Brazil, Venezuela, Cuba, Panama. I mean, just to name a few. It's very concerning to me. What do you think our best tools are to combat that, not only militarily, but also from a PSYOPs?
I think the best tool goes with presence, right? Presence means power. It sends a strong message. But also, security cooperation allows us to give a chance to build our partner capability capacity. One of the key things our partners are asking for is maritime domain awareness to get at the fishing fleet. They don't have the assets to get out there. They don't actually see what's out there, right? So we have to make sure we continue to build their capability capacity and have assets to support them.
Thank you. And what assets are we lacking? I know that when you talk about a paramilitary force, it's hard to confront directly, obviously. We know what they're doing for intel. We know what they're doing to confound us. What can we do better as far as supplying you with the necessary assets to combat this?
So to be clear, as I look at my Navy assets, I have one Navy ship today, right? So I got to do more. I mean, I need more assets throughout the region. And also, when I look at our partners and what they don't have, I think security cooperation gets those the tools they need. We've got some great support with Ex-Im Bank to try to buy and get in front of the foreign military sales process. But again, having them the assets so they can do their own and we can support them. I mean, our defense of this homeland is tied to their resiliency, security, and stability. So we got to make sure we continue to support them as well.
Okay. And what can we do from a partner aspect of encouraging these nations, especially those ones that are tipping right now, the ones that are right on the verge of basically handing it over to the bad guys. What do we do better as a nation, in diplomacy, to keep them tight, to bring them back over to where we want them to be?
I think a starting point is you have to make sure our ambassadors are in place, right, so they continue to work with them. And then we start looking for ways to increase the economic engagement. We have an economic strategic working group we started a couple of years ago with working with the Department of Commerce to look to find that direct investment from the United States. We have to do that.
Excellent. General, appreciate you being here. I don't have many questions for you. Please give General Carnes my absolute regards. He is a stud.
Thank you, sir. I agree.
With that, I yield, sir.
Chairman yields back. This will be the last questioner in the open session. A gentleman from New York, Mr. Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you all being here, and as we approach 3 hours, appreciate your resilience and endurance through all of our questions. I'll try to be relatively respectful and gentle here. Two topics I wanted to hit on. First, some of my colleagues have talked about this, several on counter-UAS, but I want to just re-emphasize the importance of this point and share in my district. We have a really interesting setup where we have Stewart Air National Guard Base, which is both Air National Guard, but also an actual international civilian airport, which presents a lot of complexities. And late last year, we actually had a series of controlled airspace drone incursions in December 2024, including several very, very sizable drones that were within 25 feet of our C-17 fleet at Stewart. The airport actually had to close down under on the FAA side, which is in and of itself unprecedented. And in conversations with leadership there at Stewart, they are still doing their best, certainly, and working very, very hard, but feel that they still don't have full clarity on authorities, and I appreciate some of your answers on that, General Guillot, today, and also certainly don't have the tech and some of the other support pieces that they need. So on that note, General Guillot, you talked about 130I. Have you actually recommended to the Secretary that all installations have that? I know you said that in your previous answer. Has that recommendation been made?
Yes, Congressman, I have made that recommendation.
Is your sense that that's moving quickly, or that there's anything we can do to accelerate that given the urgency?
Sir, it's been well received, and I think it's moving quickly. That and the other three elements that I brought up that I think we need to better address this threat, this growing threat.
Thank you. And I think it was my colleague, Mr. Whitman, spoke about sort of deploying some sort of relatively rapidly deployable set of tools. Is that something that the committee can support, or that we can support to push on?
Congressman, I'll take any help I can get there. We have the authority now to use flyaway kits. I think we have the great relationship with FAA that would allow us to operate them quickly. We just need to procure and field those kits so we can respond to Picatinny and Stewart in a fast. My goal would be inside of 24 hours being able to respond.
And just to build on that very quickly, to their credit on the ground and partnering with the TAG in New York State, there are some very sophisticated tech capabilities there at Stewart that they're exercising and practicing now. And so figuring out, to the chairman's point and the ranking member's point, how to speed up the procurement of those exact kind of capabilities, I think is something we're all keen to push on. Very quickly, I wanted to shift to a different topic and bring both General and the Admiral into this, and possibly you, Mr. Leonardo, as well, if we have time. There was very concerning reporting about a potential consolidation of Northcom and Southcom into a new entity. Not a lot of public details available, but I want to commend and acknowledge my colleagues, including Chairman Rogers and SAS Chairman Wicker, speaking out, saying, at a minimum, we're very concerned about reports that this is being considered, and, quote, we will not accept significant changes to our warfighting structure that are made without a rigorous interagency process, coordination with combatant commanders and the Joint Staff, and collaboration with Congress. Actually, I'll start with you, Mr. Leonardo. Is that happening right now? Is this real? Is this just another thing that's sort of been put out there, or is there an actual interagency process playing along, and do you plan to update the Congress and this committee on that?
I don't want to get ahead of internal deliberations, but I will note we want to maintain a strong collaboration with Congress to make sure that you have up-to-date information. And I'll also note, as I started today, the homeland and Western Hemisphere are high priorities for this administration, so any such decisions would have to weigh against what resources are necessary in order to fulfill the missions that we need to do in those areas.
Do you acknowledge, and does the administration acknowledge, that this would require an actual act of Congress to do?
I wouldn't like to speak on the hypothetical questions.
Well, it's not hypothetical. I'm asking you, would removing a combatant command, which has been proposed, require, or merging to be specific, require congressional approval and ultimately authorization?
I'd have to review with the lawyers, sir, whether or not that would require congressional authorization.
I know I'm out of time. I appreciate it, and I know we're at the end. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me the time. I'll yield back.
Gentleman yields back. We will now recess this open session and move to 2212 for the closed session of the hearing, which will start at 10 minutes after 1 o'clock.
Let's say the committee stands adjourned.
Committee stands adjourned. Yep.